Will everyone take their seats, please? Thank you for joining the Senate Finance Committee. Today is Wednesday, February 19th. We are going to hear bills in this order, but the bill order can change based on our senators being in other committees or waiting for other committee senators to come here. It's that time of year, so this is the order until it changes. Senate Bill 431, Senate Bill 752, 785, 658, 922, 400, 576, 445, 703, and 559. So sponsors, you can have as much time to present your bill as you need. Witnesses, you have 2 minutes. I'm Senator Pam Vidal, chair of the committee, and I have with me Senator Antonio Hayes, my vice chair. And I'd like to welcome again the Lieutenant Governor, Aruna Miller, is here with us. So Lieutenant Governor, would you like to come to the table? And I have your panel as Secretary Portia Wu, Christopher McLarian, Nate Fink, and Sumit Dave. Thank you all very much. You can begin when you're ready.
All right. Well, it's great to see you again, Madam Chair, and Vice Chair Hayes, and the members of the Senate Finance Committee. I am Aruna Miller, Lieutenant Governor of Maryland. And Madam Chair, I understand this is a special day in your family. Your ride or die, your partner in crime, I understand it's Len's birthday today. Please tell him a happy birthday from the people of Maryland to him. Oh, well, it's great to be here back again. I think I was just here yesterday in the committee testifying, and it's always a pleasure to be here. So I'm here to proudly support Senate Bill 431, the Registered Apprenticeship Investments for a Stronger Economy, otherwise known as the RAISE Act. I want to first thank Senator Rosa Pepp for always keeping Maryland's workforce front and center. His leadership and partnership on this issue are second to none. And I also want to give a great big shout out to the 2030 Commission for their vision and hard work to reduce skills shortages in high demand occupations for all the work that they're doing. So for our state to be globally competitive in the future, we have to invest in the workforce of today. For businesses to grow and thrive, we must ensure a steady pipeline of skilled talent. And for Marylanders to secure good-paying middle-class jobs, we need to create clear pathways and real opportunities. That's exactly what Senate Bill 431 does and will deliver. Now, I just have to say Maryland has some serious bragging rights. We have the most diverse population in the Mid-Atlantic region. We're home to the wealthiest majority Black counties in the country, Charles County and Prince George's County. We house 60 federal agencies, 20 military installations. We boast world-class infrastructure, including the Port of Baltimore, BWI Airport, and so much more. And when it comes to innovation, we lead the way with 74 federal research labs, twice as many as any other state. And we're home to 57 colleges and universities, 4 HBCUs. And just today, hot off the press, Wallet Hub ranked Maryland #2 in the nation among the most educated states. That tells us one thing: Marylanders are ready to lead. But to stay competitive, we need to match talent with opportunity. The RAISE Act expands apprenticeships and career pathways, helping our skilled workforce meet demand and tackle our workforce shortage. And the Moore-Miller administration has been taking bold steps to strengthen Maryland's workforce. We expanded Earn Maryland with record funding to scale up workforce training, ensuring employers lead the way. We launched the Apprenticeship Pledge to bring more private sector employers into the apprenticeship programs. And we funded Cyber Maryland to create cyber workforce training program to all 16 of Maryland's community colleges. And SB 431, the RAISE Act, builds on this momentum. It strengthens Maryland's apprenticeship programs by making them more accessible, opening more doors for workers in both traditional trades and high-growth fields like IT and cybersecurity. It creates the Maryland Office of Registered Apprenticeship Development to scale up these programs statewide and also proposes policy updates. And it gives state more flexibility to recognize and experience training so workers can get licensed and on the job faster. And it also creates support programs to connect businesses with apprentices, making it easier for employers to train the next generation of skilled workers. So what we know for sure is that apprenticeships work. They offer real-world experience, a paycheck from day one, and a direct route to stable careers without crushing student debt. And when we bet on apprenticeships, we're making a winning investment on Maryland's future. Businesses get the talent they need, workers get the opportunities they deserve. Your support and passage of Senate Bill 431, the RAISE Act, isn't just a good idea, it's a game changer. This is how we, in partnership with all of you, will lead the nation in innovative workforce development and win big for Maryland. The RAISE Act is a win-win. I ask for your favorable report on Senate Bill 431. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Madam Secretary, you be next. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Hayes, and the members of the committee. I'm Portia Wu, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Labor, and I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor, of course, the Governor, for their support for registered apprenticeship. If we want Maryland's economy to grow, we need to have skilled talent in our state, and that means growing apprenticeship. It means building on the outstanding models that have been developed over many decades with union labor management cooperation. It means expanding apprenticeship to new industries, including lighthouse sectors, as well as building on foundational sectors. And it means leveraging our state dollars to support apprenticeship programs, walking the walk, not just talking the talk. It means meeting young people where they are, so providing more connections to apprenticeships from high schools and colleges, and of course, providing incentives and making it easier and more flexible for employers and small business. Our Director of Apprenticeship, Chris McLaren, to talk in more detail about the bill, but I wanted to highlight a couple of key levers that this legislation includes as part of the administration's overall approach to growing apprenticeship. First, it creates a qualified intermediary program. These are critical to expansions at scale, particularly for non-traditional and small businesses. They provide a bridge between industry, training providers, and education. We are committed to developing intermediaries that will create self-sustaining infrastructure and collect and share data to promote transparency, quality, and innovation. It also establishes apprenticeship incentives to help small businesses and new entrants ease the costs. It tackles the issues of ratios while providing clarity and certainty for all stakeholders, but also more flexibility. And it makes some structural changes, which we'll talk about more, to establish the Maryland Office of Registered Apprenticeship Development. Finally, I want to note the bill has filed included language to allow apprenticeships to stand in for licensure examination requirements among plumbing apprentices. We believe we need to smooth that path, but in response to stakeholder concerns, we are proposed to remove that section to work on it further. I respectfully request a favorable report, and with that, let me turn it over to Director McLaren.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris McLaren, and I serve as the Director of the Maryland Apprenticeship Training Program at the Maryland Department of Labor. Our office oversees the development of apprenticeship programs across the state of Maryland, and we work to recruit and register new businesses and participants to the apprenticeship model. We are the team tasked with scaling registered apprenticeship within the state. And today I'm testifying in support of Senate Bill 431, the RAISE Act. I would like to also thank the committee, Governor Moore, Lieutenant Governor Miller, and of course Secretary Wu for their continued prioritization of this work. As Secretary Wu explained, the RAISE Act supports the expansion of this proven job training strategy. The bill's provisions will add tools and expand bandwidth for our team, allowing us to deliver on the promise of growing these apprenticeships to help grow Maryland's economy. First, the RAISE Act delivers tools for the toolbox that we can use to expand the apprenticeship model. As we look to grow, we must maintain high standards of safety and quality while also allowing some flexibility with expanded apprenticeship to journey worker ratios. In particular, expanding the ratio past a 1-to-1 will be a critical tool as we reach out to the technology, cyber, and administrative industries and encourage them to launch new apprenticeship programs with us. In these safe, non-hazardous workspaces, an expanded ratio makes sense and can be accomplished in a manner that is safe for workers and for the public. In addition, having strong language in the law will also serve to protect the 1-to-1 ratio in industries that have long been recognized as hazardous, such as occupations in construction and mining. This language will also ensure that programs with hazardous occupations are protected and not subject to the whims of ever-changing positions at the federal level. Two additional tools that the RAISE Act offers includes the Qualified Intermediary Program and the Maryland Apprenticeship Incentive Program. The first program will allow us to work with industry insiders to grow new occupations, while the second program acts as a carrot to help incentivize employers to try the model. In terms of bandwidth, the RAISE Act will establish the Maryland Office of Registered Apprenticeship Development to allow the department to more effectively market apprenticeships, and also will repeal the Youth Apprenticeship Advisory Committee, which eliminates a committee whose function is duplicative of current operations. The RAISE Act will support and scale the registered apprenticeship model across Maryland, create an opportunity for workers, providing talent for businesses, and growing our state's economy. With that, ma'am, I respectfully request a favorable report by the committee on SB 431, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Christopher. Who's next? Suman or Nate? Come on.
Good afternoon. Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee, my name is Nathaniel Fink, and I am here in support of Senate Bill 431, the RAISE Act. I am proud to share my experience as an automotive technician who has benefited from a registered apprenticeship program. Through this program, I've had the unique opportunity to work full-time as an auto repair technician while simultaneously attending the Community College of Baltimore County's automotive program. This dual approach, combining hands-on training with classroom education, was instrumental in shaping my career. Learning diagnostic techniques and repair procedures in class and immediately applying them in a real-world setting allowed me to develop a deeper and more practical understanding of my trade. Equally valuable was the mentorship I received from experienced professionals who not only refined my technical skills, but also instilled the importance of continuous learning and industry adaptability. Their guidance gave me the confidence to tackle complex challenges and grow as a professional. Another significant advantage of this apprenticeship was the ability to earn college credits without incurring large student loans. These credits have laid the foundation for a future degree, making higher education an attainable goal that aligns with my career path. Additionally, the structured training prepared me for ASE certification exams, validating my experience and opening doors for career advancement. Looking back, choosing the apprenticeship path was one of the best decisions I've ever made. It provided me with the skills, knowledge, and direction necessary for long-term success in a field I am passionate about. This model represents a structured and rewarding alternative to traditional college, equipping the next generation of skilled professionals with the tools they need to thrive. I urge your continued support for apprenticeship programs that foster career growth, industry excellence, and economic opportunity. Thank you for your time and your consideration. I'm sorry. Quickly, I'd like to add that today, February 19th, is also my birthday, and it would be a tremendous birthday present to receive your support for this bill. Thank you.
It's a good day, Nate. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee, my name is Sumit Dave, and I'm here in support of Senate Bill 431, the RAISE Act. I'm very grateful for this piece of legislation because I have and had the benefit of living through most of the parts that it supports. Coming from a healthcare background where I worked in a mediocre position and with very difficult conditions for moving up the ladder, I was able to completely turn my situation around thanks to my apprenticeship program. The partnership between Howard Community College and AT&T has truly catapulted me forward with an opportunity in IT, which that would otherwise seem impossible. Facing near defeat in finding a job relevant to my field with 100+ applicants possessing master's education or higher and numerous years of experience, from listings on LinkedIn or Indeed, classes at night, I thought I would be swept away. However, from the apprenticeship program, I worked during the day and took classes at night and was able to complete the requirements that were placed. Now I am waiting for my security clearance so that I can work full-time, hopefully at the NSA. Here, specialization outweighs the cost of this great opportunity. It is surely a win-win for all sides because the graduate can do the specific job, has the education, and thus saves the company time and money. This methodology provides a great opportunity for many fields and should not be overlooked. The individual is not getting a job from just connections, only intelligence, or only their resume. They serve as a mutual relationship between themselves, the school, and their employer, which is completely legitimate. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Lieutenant Governor, I have two quick questions. One is the fiscal note is $1.5 million this year and $6.5 million next year. Has the governor put that in the budget? Is it in the current budget?
Yes, I believe we have put it in the budget.
Thank you. And there are a number of amendment requests from some of our major union employers. Have you talked with them about their amendments? Are you aware of the amendments?
We are aware of the amendments, and we are in discussions with them on it.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Look forward to hearing from you that you've all come to the table and sang Kumbaya. Thank you.
We hope to get there too, Madam
Senator
Chair. Thank
Washington?
you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great bill. Looks like a fantastic bill. Thank you for being here, Lieutenant Governor, and great to see you, Secretary Wu. This bill, part of this bill looks really familiar on the apprenticeship ratios. Last year, someone sponsored a bill last year doing a similar thing, but we got a letter of concern last year. Can you tell us what's the difference between last year and this year?
Thank you, Senator. And, I never want to say we don't learn from being in front of this committee. We did learn, and we understand your concern. Last year, I think we were concerned that it was sort of prescribing certain frameworks, which we thought it would make more sense to start with prescribing the one-to-one ratio. And as Director McLaren noted, there's a lot of change at the federal level now. Having that clarity and certainty in statute, we think will really help, but also providing an expedited process to approve in non-hazardous occupations the additional ratios. It's very similar to some of the issues we raised last year. We welcome your feedback if you think that the language doesn't quite get us there, but we've been talking with a number of folks, and we are trying to address and meet all needs concerned.
Can you just describe some of the, thank you for that, because I know you're part of the bill that we did pass was kind of a study that you had to present. Can you just talk a little bit about what recommendations you made from that study?
So yes, Mr. Senator, happy to do so. Out of the legislation sponsored last year, we did have to do a report, as you mentioned. And in that report, we went through a list of all the occupations approved in the state of Maryland from 1962, give or take, till now. We then sorted that list against the USDOL guidance at the time, which is issued in 2021 under the Biden administration, to see what fell into the hazardous occupation exemption list. And then we carved out all the occupations that did not meet the definition of hazardous occupation, created that list into a report, which was now on our website as well, and then allowed us to, as the Secretary mentioned, to create a bill for your review that will give us a pathway to protect those hazardous occupations, the one-to-one ratio occupations, but also to do expanded ratios, particularly like cyber, IT, certain administrative occupations that have no hazard to the public, to the worker, the journey worker, or the apprentice.
Got it. And this is also a part of the governor as well, the Blueprint for Maryland's future goal of having a certain amount of apprenticeships by a certain time, right? This would encourage it, right?
Yes, sir. It would certainly feed into that. Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we have questions from Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Lieutenant Governor and Secretary and folks testified. Lieutenant Governor, you mentioned the Apprenticeship Commission 2030, which I'm a member of. I just want to know how closely did you work with the commission? I know we had lots of meetings and subcommittees throughout the state, because I'm concerned in that it seemed like the white-collar people who are totally in favor of this bill, favorable, but the unions are like, let's amend it, or we just overwrite, don't like it. So what kind of coordination you guys had, you folks have, the administration had, in kind of working with the structure that we kind of working through for the last couple of years with the commission?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator. And I believe we have members of the that the governor has appointed on the commission. And like any policy, I think there's always going to be disagreement. Nothing ever comes through with everyone feeling good about it. And so the idea is to have these work groups and these commissions to come out with the ideas and reach out to those that may have concerns. And we know the product of 2030 Commission, it's really bold. It's got some excellent suggestions. This is just a little part of it, the bill that we are proposing to do. The commission's work, I think it's for long-range, implementation. And as part of that dialogue and that continued feedback from the various stakeholders will continue.
Yeah, and I just want to add that even the commission, our recommendations, which we voted on last Friday, was not totally unanimous. We have some of our members who abstained or were like, hey, well, hold up, we're not 100% in favor of that. But I'm really concerned about, especially with the plumbers, saying that, taking away certain examination requirements might be dangerous for gas fitters and stuff like that, which, how do you feel about that? Have you thought about that?
Yes, Senator, and thank you for raising that to attention. Our idea behind that was to, and of course we worked with the Plumbers Board on this idea, was that, similarly to some of the other skilled trades, that apprenticeship could stand in for the licensure, but we heard the concerns, and as I noted, we're planning to withdraw that provision and work further on that and engage in further dialogue, absolutely. And, at the start of my remarks, to address your other question, I noted the incredibly strong foundation and rich history that labor management partnerships have had in building the registered apprenticeship movement. We know they are the gold standard in terms of quality and safety. I'm very mindful of that. I used to work with a lot of those training funds. So we understand their concerns, and we absolutely commit to working with those stakeholders to make sure they're addressed.
Yeah, another question. There's a strong apprenticeship program in Maryland with engineering. So there's different pathways individuals can become professional engineers. There's a traditional one, Lieutenant Governor, go to college, right, and get that degree and go through that process. But individuals also in Maryland can come out of high school, go work for an engineering company or agency, and after, I believe, 10 years, take that professional engineering exam, and voila, they're licensed professional engineers. Do you have any data on that particular pathways where individuals come out of high school, go into a registered apprenticeship program? Do you have any data, Secretary Wu?
I'll turn it to Director McLaren. We certainly do have data on all our apprentices. People come at all different times of life. Sometimes they come straight from high school, sometimes they come from another career. But Chris.
But I'm concerned about the high school into this particular pathway.
Sure. And Mr. Senator, thank you for the question as well, and thank you, Secretary Wu. We do track all the data, age of entry into an occupation, age of exit from an occupation, whether that individual canceled out of apprenticeship or completed the apprenticeship. We also work with our partners at MLDS to do wage tracking data.
MLDS?
Maryland Longitudinal Data System, sorry.
Great, thank you.
To do wage tracking multiple years after exit. And we're always looking to refine the data and get much more in the weeds with it. One of the things I will say is when we talk about the 18-year-old demographic, so I'm using 18-year-old as a graduation date, of course, or age. We have seen a large increase in Maryland of the number of 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, and 20-year-olds entering the apprenticeship program. Back in 2016, when we first got the program at Division of Workforce Development and Adult Learning, the average age of entry, if I remember correctly, was about 26 years old. So we're seeing a massive swing as we're getting younger and younger Marylanders in, and some of that's certainly the work of the 2030 Commission, as you mentioned earlier. It's work of the Blueprint, it's work of the local school system partners, workforce agencies, things like that. Now, for the engineering pathway, the 10-year path that you refer to is outside of the registered apprenticeship system, but we can certainly ask for our partners at licensing to assist us with getting the data for the 10-year path, and I can swing that back around in the next week or so.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Be happy to do so, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your question, Senator. Seeing no other questions for this panel, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
We're going to call the next four people that are favorable. Tim House, Tom Hood, Bruce Spector, and Brandon Butler. Who would like to start?
Well, I'm on the end, so Madam Chair, good afternoon. My name is Brandon Butler, Pinnacle Strategies on behalf of the Maryland Workforce Association. You may know the association's members by another name like the Anne Arundel Workforce Development Corporation or Employ Prince George's. We are the 13 local workforce boards in the state of Maryland, and we are in support of Senate Bill 431 for a number of reasons. One, we believe that local workforce boards, those who are day in and day out connecting job seekers with employment opportunities, are intermediaries. We've done that work and we continue to do that work, whether as an intermediary connecting with apprenticeship opportunities, or some local workforce boards are actually sponsors of apprenticeship programs. So we also like this bill for the reason why Senator Washington pointed out. We supported the ratio bill last year, and we continue to do so with the language that's in this current bill. And finally, the association is not only talking the talk about apprenticeships, but we're also walking the walk. We're working right now with the department as well as our friends from the Baltimore or BSR Cyber and the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, where we are developing a SOC analyst apprenticeship for connecting the cyber programs with employment opportunities and the jobs that are through the cyber ranges that are being built at the community colleges. And for those reasons, Madam Chair, we ask for the favorable consideration of this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Biddle and members of the Senate Finance Committee. My name is Bruce Spector. Can you all hear me? My name is Bruce Spector, and I am the chairman of the Baltimore Cyber Range, a Maryland-based company dedicated to developing a well-trained cybersecurity workforce that meets the needs of Maryland's economy. Our mission is to equip individuals with hands-on, real-world cybersecurity training to fill the thousands of job vacancies in this critical sector, and we are accomplishing this mission with our Cyber Workforce Accelerator. I am here today to express support for Senate Bill 431, the Registered Apprenticeship Investments for a Strong Economy, the RAISE Act, which advances the growth and accessibility of registered apprenticeships across Maryland, including non-traditional industries such as cybersecurity. Apprenticeships provide individuals with practical on-the-job training while allowing businesses to develop a talent pipeline that meets their specific workforce needs. The Moore administration has taken important steps to scale and expand apprenticeships beyond traditional trades, and this legislation reinforces the commitment. By broadening apprenticeship opportunities in fields such as cyber, health, and technology, Maryland will strengthen its workforce and remain competitive in an increasingly digital economy. Baltimore Cyber Range has direct experience with registered apprenticeships, having previously run a successful registered apprenticeship program. We are currently working to establish a new registered apprenticeship program focused on training professionals for secure operating centers, known as SOCs, a critical area of need within the cybersecurity industry. Through this work, we have seen the benefits and challenges of implementing apprenticeships in technology-driven fields. Unlike traditional trade apprenticeships, technology apprenticeships are not as well established and often face unique obstacles, including the lack of standardized training modules, difficulty in meeting traditional journeyman to apprenticeship ratios, and high costs associated with recruiting, training, and supporting apprentices. Senate Bill 431 provides key solutions to these challenges. The bill allows for greater flexibility in journeyman to apprenticeship ratios, key to the success in the cybersecurity industry. By authorizing a process for formal deviation requests from rigid ratio requirements, this legislation will allow employers to provide more apprenticeship opportunities without unnecessary administrative responses. I urge you for favorable consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tom Hood. I am a CPA and a CGMA and a resident of Baltimore City, currently the Executive Vice President of Business Engagement and Growth for the AICPA and SEMA, the largest global association of accounting and finance professionals in the world. We have a severe talent shortage in accounting and finance, and we work with the Maryland Association of CPAs. So CPAs is one pipeline. CGMA is another alternative that's now been enabled by the apprenticeship. So we filed the first finance and accounting apprenticeship in the United States with the USDOL and piloted it in the state of Maryland due to all of the great programs that you have. I think this bill, in support of Senate Bill 431, adds some new tools that will make it easier to keep scaling this program. By the way, we're now operating in 4 other states, and Maryland is, in fact, the gold standard and looked favorably upon by all the other states that we've been working in. So it's really exciting to be pioneering it right here in the state of Maryland. So we wish you to support Senate Bill 431. Thank you.
And finally, you must be Tim House.
That's me.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and as you said, my name is Tim House. I'm Executive Vice President and a Chief Operating Officer at the Wireless Infrastructure Association, also a lifelong Maryland resident. We represent more than 200 companies that build telecommunications networks across the United States. And for more than a decade, we've invested in workforce development initiatives. One of our most noteworthy endeavors is the Telecommunications Industry Registered Apprenticeship Program, which we launched in 2014 with support from the Department of Labor and the FCC. We became the national sponsor of that program in 2017 and were designated as an industry intermediary by the Department of Labor in 2020. With support and resources from the Department of Labor through their industry intermediary program, we took this program from less than a dozen employers to now 107 employers. We expanded to 16 apprenticeable occupations, and we now have nearly 6,000 apprentices who have gone through our program. I'm here to express my strong support for the RAISE Act, in particular the provision on the qualified intermediary program, because it closely resembles the federal program, which led to the rapid expansion of apprenticeship in our industry. I believe that it will serve as a model to other states and help us build the workforce of tomorrow. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for this panel? I do not see any questions. Thank you all for your work.
Thank you.
Our next panel is favorable with amendments. Kevin O'Keefe, Ray Baker, and Donna Edwards. Mr. Baker, you want to start?
Sure. I'll be happy to get started. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Beidel, Vice Chair Hayes, and committee. My name is Ray Baker. I am the Maryland Director of the Baltimore, D.C. Building Trades. We represent more than 28 affiliates with 30,000 union construction workers across Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. We urge passage of this bill with amendments. We already heard a willingness to move away from the plumber's licensure exam. That was one of the amendments that we were hoping to engage in. And again, we've been in conversation with the administration. We look forward to future conversations that would produce the bill with the amendments that we suggest. Again, we have issue with the deviation of the one-to-one journey person apprenticeship ratio. One of the things we're worried about is the slippery slope potential that the opportunities of a journey person and apprentice work with. The work that our construction workers do is so valuable and dangerous in many points that we are concerned that if we expand that ratio any, we jeopardize the welfare of our workers and also of the projects they're working on. Finally, we also want to investigate and would appreciate amendments around the questions of the qualified intermediaries. We believe this program could benefit from additional considerations that have been outlined in my written testimony. Given the amount of time and the number of voices you're going to hear from, I will refer you to that written testimony, and I am happy to take any questions. We urge passage of this only with those amendments. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Donna Edwards?
Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. We've been working on this bill with the governor's office since December, provided a lot of conversation and input from various unions, was recently on a call just last week with our public unions as well as our private unions. So the amendments reflect those that we thought we had agreement on from the governor's office and staff, so I'm not going to go through all of my amendments. I do want to to just point out, I've also been a member of the 2030 Commission. And while we appreciate all of the dialogue, it seems like somehow we end up in the minority of conversation all the time. The one thing that we definitely want to impose and keep saying is keep the integrity of what an apprenticeship is. It is not a training. And one of the things that Maryland lacks is a baseline information on how many trainings we have versus our apprenticeship. We know our apprentices, but we don't know the training. So who's going to come after this money, the tax money, by saying that their program is now an apprentice program and not a training program? That's a very important thing, because an apprentice program, you are paid from the beginning. You have increased progressive wages as your skills and productivity go forward, and you are also got a career and a job at the end. Also, the fiscal note, that is largely going to be paid to sponsors and intermediaries. And the one thing that we found throughout everything, even the 2030 report, as well as this legislation, it is geared towards businesses and not the outcome for the worker. We really want the outcome for the worker to be tracked, to be reported by all of the new programs, and also followed for a 5-year outcome. What are their wages? What are their benefits? What is their career path? Or we've been throwing our tax dollars again to businesses that are not increasing our economy and our middle class. So with that, we support the bill if these amendments are accepted. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Kevin?
Good afternoon, Chair Bidle, Vice Chair Hayes, and members of the committee. My name's Kevin O'Keefe. I'm here on behalf of Independent Electrical Contractors Chesapeake, which is headquartered in Laurel, Maryland, and we have approximately 1,000 registered apprentices in the electrical trade. After reviewing this bill, which we support, I've submitted a statement with 4 possible amendments that we'd like to consider. The first one is on page 3, lines 7 to 19, when they talk about doing away with the examination requirements. That in terms of future licenses, for instance, if there is a low voltage license in the future, would future licenses would be eligible for that? And that answer, that we would support it with that. Then on page 4, about the on the ratio issue, there is a issue on line 6 and 7. Consider formal written deviation requests from all their occupations. So at some point in time, what would be not non-hazardous occupations could also, with a formal recommendation and request, be considered for a ratio change. And then page 5 and 6, we oppose, or we would suggest not eliminating a youth advisory apprenticeship commission, because you want to be able to get young people involved in apprentices at a young age. And finally, in the last section of the bill, in order to qualify for the tax credit, for the credit, instead of 7 months employment, we would suggest 3 months employment, which would give more flexibility to employers, especially in terms of hiring during different seasons. And summer is a big hiring time. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, I have a question.
Yes.
We met at the electrical
Yes, and
work.
thank you.
And one of the issues were transportation for the
Yes.
young people that were starting their apprenticeship. I haven't read the entire bill yet. It's pretty big. But is there anything in the bill that helps with things like transportation that you've noticed?
I did not notice.
Okay.
But I do know there is there's a bill that's in Senator Benson introduced that would try to get funding for driver's education.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And thank you for visiting, and
That was
everybody else
That was a really good visit.
is
Thank you.
invited to come too.
Senator Ellis, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony, panel members. Ms. Edwards, you made a statement. You said that we end up in the minority in a lot of these issues. Who's the we you were referring to?
Oh, labor. I
Labor.
represent labor.
Yeah. Okay. What do you mean by you end up in the minority with the?
Well, I mean-
I know you're on the committee. Were you talking about the
Yeah.
commission, 2030
The
commission,
commission.
particularly, or? Yeah.
When we're giving up our opinions, yes. You know, I mean, recently we did voting on several of the issues, and there was labor and everybody else.
Okay.
4 to several dozen is different.
Yeah, why do you think that is? I mean, as far as,
I
Because I don't
can't
think you-
answer why that is for everybody else.
no, I mean, with the
But I-
issue
like
of
I-
apprenticeship and you being heard.
Our biggest concern in all of this, and it's something that I think requires kind of a cultural shift, is that we have, as a state, looked at businesses as, well, if we give them tax credits for creating jobs and maintaining jobs, we're going to, bolster our economy. We've been doing that for decades now, and we're still 47th or 50th in job creation. We're still at 1.7. This is aimed at, we're going to create all of these jobs. Well, we're going to create all of these apprentice. And I think it's about time that we figure out from a worker perspective, what am I gaining? Am I going to be putting myself into this, believing as hard as I can that I am going to have a middle class career when I come out, and then be heartbroken because all I've done is got trained, somebody got a tax credit, and I don't have a career. So that's why our apprenticeship programs that we do in healthcare or hospitality or in construction all have an end result of
And the
a
end result
good
is-
career. And that's what we want to see out of this. We
And-
believe in apprenticeship.
When you say the end result is a good career, I mean, how do you get to that end result?
Good training, good apprenticeship, not training, apprenticeships. There's training where there's plenty of training schools and you can train 5 people or 20 people. But if you're saying you graduate and find your own job, then that's not an apprenticeship. An apprenticeship leads to a career. And therefore, that will help the Maryland economy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator? Senator Washington?
I appreciate your line of thoughts, the line of thoughts that you had. Can you just describe what the process is for approval of an apprenticeship? Does the Department of Labor have to approve a new apprenticeship?
Yes.
And what's the process for approval?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've never started an apprenticeship.
Okay. So, I mean, the reason I'm asking the question is because you kept saying there's trainings, but then doesn't the Department of Labor have to approve an actual apprenticeship and go through
They
a
will.
process for it to be a certified apprenticeship?
It does. I think that
So it won't
they
be-
do a good job of really following the line on what is required.
Right. So it wouldn't be
And
just trainings.
There's
It'll be,
plenty of trainings out here that
Correct,
are not
right.
labeled apprenticeships.
Right.
Yes.
Because we have, in my county, we have about 6,000 IT open positions right now that are many of them are entry level, and these are IT positions. And it's very little folks that can really fill those positions coming out of high school. And I thought if we would have an apprenticeship in IT or whatever the specialty may be that could be approved by the Department of Labor, maybe this might be helpful to our young people to get them into those fields as well as in the other fields too. And so I guess I'm concerned by the line of thoughts of like it's just trainings because there's a process for these apprenticeships.
That's correct. Like apprenticeship is not just training.
Correct, right.
You're going to bring them at an entry level, and by the time they're done their apprenticeship, they're going to be 2 or 3 or 4 steps higher than when they started, and
Yeah,
they're going to be in that industry.
I just want the public to think that if we pass this bill, that we're just approving trainings, and not setting up a process for us to have actual apprenticeships that are approved by the state.
We're on the same line there.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you, Senator. I don't see any other questions for this panel. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
We have your amendments.
Yes.
There's some work to be done.
There is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have 2 unfavorables, Christopher Biondi and Tom Buckley.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, committee members, we are changing ours to support with amendments. A lot of these changes happened over the course of the last few days, and we were in opposition to this bill. My name is Chris Biondi. I'm a 20-year plumber, 20-year union member, 15-year teacher, and 5-year training director of an 80-year-old apprenticeship, and that runs alongside of a 135-year-old
trade in Maryland. Once the licensing and testing requirement was adjusted per proposed amendment, that changed the way we look at this entire thing. I talked to my own delegate, and she said, "Are you worried about working plumbers and working union plumbers?" And I said, my concern is for the safety of Marylanders, first and foremost. One is my job, and the rest are my neighbors and constituents, friends, family. So with that in mind, and with the holding of a 1-to-1 ratio for skilled/dangerous trades, that garners our support as well. Training with one experienced tradesperson to a single apprentice who does not get the full attention all day. You might be running around, you might be talking to other folks, you're working. Anything worse than that should not be considered, because these are the folks that protect our water. These are the folks that install our systems. These are folks that take used water and get it away from neighborhoods as quickly as possible, whether it's stormwater, sanitary water. So all those things together, we didn't want to see anything that would soften our apprenticeship, which we have worked, like I said, 80 to 135 years to make sure that it's the most effective program in the state, if not in the country.
Mr. Biondi, where do you teach? Where's your apprenticeship?
The apprenticeship is called the Washington, D.C. Joint Plumbing Apprenticeship, but it's based in Lanham, Maryland.
I think I visited. It was very
Yes.
impressive.
Thank
you. Nice to see you.
Thanks, you too.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and the committee members. My name is Tom Buckley, and I work with Mr. Biondi at the training facility in Lanham. I've been there for about 16 years. I started as a night instructor while I was enjoying a 31-year career as an inspector here locally in Prince George's, Montgomery County. I finished that career as the chief inspector, and it's with that I'd like to bring at least my level of perspective. I started in I'm a third-generation plumber. I started in a family business, an open shop arrangement, and throughout my career as an inspector, I can certainly appreciate the value of the training and the craftsmanship that comes from a great apprenticeship. I joined one of those great apprenticeships as a teacher to help folks get ready for their code exams so they could become licensed. And obviously, I came sort of geared up today to talk about why examination is so important. I feel great that we've done an amendment or a proposing amendment to at least take another look at that. As far as the ratio goes, yeah, I'll echo what everyone's been saying. My perspective as an inspector, knowing what actually goes on a variety of different job sites, the vision that an apprentice is standing right next to their journey worker and learning moment by moment, minute by minute, is not the actual reality. There's a lot of times that apprentice has to be in an area where they may be left alone for moments, minutes, hours at a time. Those are the things we're concerned about when someone is not being watched. We don't want these ratios watered down any more than 1-to-1. 1-to-1 is already bad enough. In some cases, right, there's different occupations, different trades, and different danger levels within each trade. But with what the worst of worst could be, again, Mr. Biondi described, water systems. We obviously, plumbers are gas fitters as well, and all the dangers that come along with gas fitting. So we want to make sure that we safeguard those ratios. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for this panel? Happy to hear you've changed to favor with amendment. Thank you very much for your testimony. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 431. Next, Senator Kramer, you're going to present Senate Bill 752. You're going to bring up your panel. Rico, whose name I cannot pronounce his last name, but I know Donna Edwards and Secretary Wu. And I think Jason Perkins is going to join me at the table with information or answer questions. So. Tom, I have you on the next panel, but if you can fit, you'd be I think you'll fit. You can join. Tom, take one of the seats. I don't know who I'm missing. Rico, Donna, Secretary Wu, Jason Perkins, Tom Clark.
Yeah, Jason is, I think he's still testifying at ECM, but hopefully he'll be
Okay.
here any minute.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Senator Kramer.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Pardon me, members of the committee. Ben Kramer, and introduce Senate Bill 752. Colleagues, unemployment insurance is a vital safety net for workers who lose their jobs through no fault of their own. It provides temporary financial assistance to help individuals meet basic needs while they search for new employment. In Maryland, as in other states, a well-funded and solvent unemployment trust fund is essential to ensuring that benefits remain available, particularly during economic downturns. Unemployment insurance serves as a critical support system for workers and their families. When employees lose their jobs due to layoffs, business closures, or economic downturns, UI benefits help bridge the financial gap until they secure new employment. This temporary income helps individuals cover essential expenses such as housing, food, health care, utilities, and helps prevent financial distress and reduces the likelihood of poverty. Beyond individual support, unemployment insurance also plays a broader role in stabilizing the economy. When unemployed workers receive benefits, they continue to spend money on necessities, which help sustain demand for goods and services in our local communities. This, in turn, supports those businesses and prevents a deeper economic downturn. Studies have shown that UI benefits serve as an automatic stabilizer, softening the impact of recessions and accelerating economic recovery by maintaining consumer spending. Colleagues, last month, we had a briefing presented by the Department of Labor. During the course of the briefing, it was discussed that our unemployment insurance trust fund is currently spiraling down toward insolvency. There is an average high-cost multiple that is the determinant as to the health of our UI trust fund. An average high-cost multiple of 1.0 is a measure of the overall health of the fund, and by keeping our expenditures above the 1.0 measure, allows the state to borrow from the federal government in recessionary times to replenish our fund at 0% interest. This is incredibly important. You all should have, I put on your desk just now, a little chart presented to us by the department at that briefing. And as you can see, if we were to have an upswing in unemployment to just a 5% level, our fund would be dropping below the 1.0 AHCM as soon as the year 2027. And with just a moderate unemployment rate of 3.75%, we will be underwater by the year 2029. The bill before you seeks to address the solvency concern and to provide benefits from the trust fund that realistically reflect the economy of the year 2025. Currently, unemployment insurance premiums are based on the first $8,500 of an employee's salary, which is one of the lowest levels in the entire nation. The figure of $8,500 was established in statute in the year 1992. I'm going to repeat that, colleagues. The $8,500 figure was established in 1992. Adjusted for inflation, that figure currently would be $19,500. So the bill before you indexes the taxable wage base to 20% of the average Maryland annual wage, and it phases in that rate over several years so that by the year 2028, the new rate will result in a taxable wage base of $15,210, not quite what the inflation-adjusted rate would have been since 1992, but much closer to what is reality in the year 2025. This change, colleagues, will help keep the UI Trust Fund healthy and solvent. The bill also gradually adjusts the current weekly benefit to 50% of the average weekly wage for the maximum benefit and adjusts the minimum weekly benefit to 15% of the average weekly wage. Let me tell you what that means. The current maximum weekly benefit is set at a fixed $430. The minimum benefit at $50. Colleagues, these amounts were set 15 years ago in the year 2010. Once again, very much outdated in the realities of the economy of the year 2025. With the changes as proposed in the bill, the maximum will be closer to $700 and the minimum will be approximately $210. Additionally, the bill increases the dependent allowance to $25 and indexes it to inflation. This will be an increase from the current $8 for dependents, which was last adjusted 3 decades ago in the year 1988. So once again, looking to bring the costs and the benefits into the reality of the economy of the year 2025. Now, I understand that my friends in the business community are opposing the changes reflected in this bill, and I know that my good friend Kaylee Locklear is going to come to the table along with my good friend Mike O'Halloran, and they are going to have their thoughts as to the implications of this bill. But my goal is to try to work with the business community to find a compromise, if that can be done. Maybe not. But the reality is our businesses are not selling their products at 1988, 1992, or 2010 prices, which are the dates that the current unemployment insurance values reflect. The prices of their products have absolutely increased with inflation over the decades, and there needs to be a reality check and a reality reset on the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. And without a reset, soon our Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund will become insolvent. So with that, thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, thank you for your time. And I will now turn it over to the panel. And I am grateful and appreciative that Secretary Wu is here, because I am far from the pro from Dover on unemployment insurance. So if there are any tough questions, I will immediately punt them to the Secretary. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Secretary Wu, you want to go next?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I'm Portia Wu, Secretary of Maryland Department of Labor. I'm providing informational testimony today on behalf of the department. This legislation seeks to tackle critical problems, and we are grateful to the Senator for his leadership. Maryland's UI system faces structural challenges that must be addressed. Unemployment insurance is vital for workers, employers, and our state's economy. It supports labor force attachment and buffers economic shocks, keeping workers available in the labor market and supporting local economies during tough times. As the committee evaluates its policy choices, it's important to consider how decisions will impact the solvency of the fund. You have the models before you. I will note when we did the committee briefing before, we provided sort of the lower unemployment rate, 5%, which was a recent historic average. We added that third line, which is a Great Recession style unemployment projection. I just want to call the committee's attention to that. Obviously, we hope we are not facing that situation, but because we recognize times are very uncertain right now for Maryland and its economy, we wanted to provide that additional context. As the senator mentioned, it's important to update some of these issues, and many of these benefit levels and contribution tables have not been updated for many years. During the pandemic, contributions went from table A to F, or for the lowest level rating employers from $25.50 per employee per year to $187. I want to underscore the cost of not acting is not nothing. It does mean that during a recession or sudden downturn, the tables will go up and employers will face tax increases at a very sudden rate at a time when the economy is weak. We believe that any approach to reform should be clear, predictable, and fair. As you undertake this effort, it's also important to consider that federal funding for UI has decreased, while fraud and IT systems costs have risen sharply, and so the state can no longer rely solely on the feds to support UI, and we urge you to consider other approaches. Look forward to working with the committee and happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you, and members of the committee, thank you. We are in full support of the bill. And just as to give you some text to it, I have been on the Joint UI Task Force since 2002. And so I've been through it when we were at the Great Recession of 2008. Maryland's solvency was great then at the point where we were only one of 3 states that did not have to pay interest when we borrowed from the federal government. And then fast forward, we didn't fix it. We've been trying to fix it. There was an agreement well over 30 years ago to even try to get the maximum to 2/3 of payment each week. We didn't fix it. So then we got COVID. And everybody was screaming then, we can't afford to fix it. We can't. We've come out of COVID, we didn't fix it, and there's a tsunami coming. We know that federal employment is going to take a hit here in Maryland. We also know that 21% of our employees are immigrants. We also know that our warehouses are going to be closing. I just today got emails from all over, from Eastern Shore as well as Western Maryland, with over 200 people losing their job as of yesterday. So this is happening. We have to fix it. I know that businesses is going to be crying, please don't. We don't have the money to do it. I'm one of those businesses. I've been at F for a couple different reasons. So I can certainly tell you that we have to plan for this. And we cannot just keep pretending it's not going to happen. So I really would like to say, please push this. And it is time that you gave a maximum increase. $430, every dime goes back in to the economy, every dime, but it does not keep you out of poverty. Thank you.
Tom Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tom Clark. I represent the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, Local 26. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this unemployment insurance modernization. The construction trades are a little different than most for the employer and the employees. We are not overhead. We are production. And as soon as anything slows down for whatever reason, layoffs happen. It's that simple. It's something that we deal with. You know, I feel bad for the employers and obviously for the employees, but it's something we deal with. I'd like to point out that IBW Local 26 has not been a burden on the unemployment insurance here in Maryland for the last 11 years. That we have like 13,000 members, 7,000 of them are Marylanders, and that's because they're traveling across the river to work on Virginia data centers. That is a hearing for another day. But I worry about the rate that the employers are paying and the employees' insurance they're receiving now is lagging. And it hadn't been adjusted in 15 years. And just since work is plentiful, I believe for the good of my members and for all Marylanders, that now is the time to fix this. Like President Kennedy said, the time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. The sun is shining right now, and I just think we should move on this bill. I thank you for your time, and I ask you for a favorable report. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the Senate Finance Committee, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come here and speak in favor of SB 752 UI modernization. My name is Rico Albuquerque. I'm a member of IBEW Local 24. We represent more than 2,400 electrical workers from Frederick all the way to Ocean City. And I think it's appropriate that the bill is titled UI modernization. I can remember 10 years ago when I was on UI benefits, I remember the fear and the shame driving home to my 4-month-old baby and my new wife and having to explain to her that through no fault of my own, I lost my job and I don't know how we're going to make ends meet. We sat down at our kitchen table, we reworked our budget. At the time, weekly benefit amount was $430, and that was just enough to pay our rent, to buy our groceries, and to pay our BG&E bill. And so that meant we weren't going to be homeless, we weren't going to go hungry, and they weren't going to turn the heat off. But Marylanders that are losing their job today, they're having a very different conversation at the kitchen table because that $430 does not stretch the same amount. 10 years ago, my BG&E bill was $125. If anybody's BG&E bill is $125, let me know. I got to do whatever it is you're doing, right? When you're thinking about your BG&E bill and your personal finances, I want you to think about your constituents as well because let's be honest, you all are state legislators. You all are exceptional. You are the exception. You are not the average Marylander. And the average Marylander cannot bear the financial burden of losing their job unexpectedly and getting by on $430 a week. They cannot bear it. I represent average, everyday workers, and on their behalf, I'm asking you to give this a favorable report. Thank you very much.
Senator Reedy has a question.
Thank you.
Not a mess.
Kind of blanched at the sun is shining comment because I don't think the sun's shining right now in a lot of ways for our small businesses and our economy, but I do understand the importance of the unemployment insurance fund and the solvency. But I'm looking through the fiscal note, and I mean, are we saying that with this, if this bill passes as is, we're going to be taking in an additional $900 million by 2027, or is that $900 million total in the fund by 2027, 2028?
I believe the increase, hold on, is shown on page 7. And no, that's not. Can you point to me where you're reading?
Well, I'm looking at page 5, or is it 4? Hold on. It's a long fiscal note because it's obviously a lot going on. It's page. Yeah, it is. I grant you that. Page 5, Maryland Labor estimates UITF revenues of approximately $900 million. I'm assuming that's with the raise that we're talking about. Whereas I think right now,
it's based on wage growth and unemployment assumptions.
Okay.
Revenues of approximately $900 million. So that is in fact total.
Okay. Because right now I think our revenues are more like, if I'm reading the fiscal note right, which I'm willing to be wrong, but it's like $425 million or $450 million. So we're doubling how much we're going to take into the unemployment fund with this increase?
Correct. Phased in over the next
few years.
Several years.
Okay. Maybe I could ask the department. I mean, are we expecting that the need will rise by double in the next 4 years?
So, Senator, I think, of course, there's always the revenues are coming in, but the money's going out all the time.
I understood.
I think the projections we provided you take all of that into account. So that now the projections you have on the slide in our written testimony is status quo. I believe we also provided some modeling based on the bill and how it could move those lines. I think actually it might both be in the testimony. So that is that shows what the impact would be on the trust fund. Again, these are rough estimates. I actually have our chief economist here, and we're happy to go into more detail with you if you'd like to get under the hood a little bit more. You can see, a goal is certainly to stay above that average high cost multiple of 1. It's sort of up to the committee and the dialogue to say, okay, how far do we turn each dial? But that shows you in those projections how the increase in revenue as well as the increase in outputs, how they'd interact.
Okay, because my concern is I've read the brief. I was at the briefing. I've read the document, and I understand we're trying to address the issue. Just want to be sure we're not having this be another burden on our job creators, because we're trying to turn the economy around with private sector job growth, consistent with what Governor Moore said. So I'm just trying to keep an eye on that. But thank you. I'll take a look at this more in depth on the testimony. Thank you.
And Senator, we're happy to do a breakdown. We have sort of like by lines on the table and can tell you how many businesses fall typically on each line, what it looks like on different tables. We're happy to provide that detail.
Senator Mounts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just two questions, two quick ones. And the first for the sponsor, so I'll make sure I understand the bill. So it would increase the weekly benefit to $430 a week. Is that correct?
The current maximum is $430. So that's been in statute since 1992. Is that, or was that?
That's 15. Yeah. It's been in 15 years, I think.
Let me go back to my notes.
Since 2000. Yeah, that's 15 years. 2010, I think.
Since 2010. Yeah, the maximum and minimum wage benefits were set in 2010. So that was 15 years ago.
And would increase that by?
Roughly to $700.
Eventually.
Yes, it's phased in over the next several years. It'll reach about $700.
Several, is that 5 or 10 years?
If we're talking 2028 under the bill as to when everything would be phased in.
And then the per dependent, it's per dependent. It was $8, and that would go up to
$25 per dependent, and that was set in 1988.
Yeah. There's no limit on the number of dependents. It's just depending how many.
I believe there is a cap currently, and that cap is retained, but I don't recall what the cap is.
Okay.
But I believe there is currently a cap.
And I had a quick question for the secretary, because we did a briefing on this, and I had a question during the briefing. Why is it's 16 weeks? Why is it
26?
26 weeks. It's 26.
Maximum.
Why is it 26 weeks? Is that mandated by federal law?
That's set in statute. There are some also parameters in federal law. I do know some states have gone below 26 weeks, but that has consequences at the federal level. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but we're happy to follow up with you, Senator.
Okay. But the 26 weeks we have in Maryland is in Maryland code?
I believe it also is, yes. And that's the standard. Most states have 26 weeks. That's typical.
Okay. But there's no other outstanding reason that there's 26 weeks?
Like I said, I believe there actually are repercussions at the federal level, and that's why for many, many years, all states essentially had 26 weeks. It's only, I would say, in the last decade or so, and it was, frankly, it came around the time of the Great Recession, and right after a lot of states made changes because they were seeing serious situations.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
And the cap is 5.
Yes.
Five dependents.
Correct.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions for this panel. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have 3 unfavorables: Mike O'Halloran, Kelly Locklear, and Hannah Allen.
Doesn't like being name checked by the sponsor. I'll fire it off. Madam Chair, members of the Senate Finance Committee, as the sponsor pointed out, my name is Mike O'Halloran, and I'm here today representing National Federation of Independent Business. We are respectfully opposed to Senate Bill 52, and the broad concern from an employer standpoint is the increase of UI taxes. Maryland employers are the only ones that pay into the UITF. So according to the fiscal notice, there's been some discussion. The bill roughly doubles employer UI taxes, and quote, small businesses pay significantly higher state UI taxes due to the increased taxable wage base beginning July 1 this year. In addition to that, there's also concern over the automatic increases that have been discussed during the sponsor's testimony. These taxes in the bill in the future years are done so without legislative debate, which is certainly, a cause for concern. As this committee debated raising the state's minimum wage, it very deliberatively removed the automatic increases tied to the CPI. That is certainly a cause for concern because, look, this is an issue certainly worthy of a vigorous debate, as the sponsor, I'm sure, will attest to. But the concern is to tie automatic increases because from an employer vantage point, from the only payer vantage point, that just sets it, forgets it, and we're only faced with increases. So that is a concern. And Senator Reedy, to your point, you had brought up the fact that by FY, going back to page 5 on the fiscal note, calendar 2028, revenues of approximately $900 million into the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. If you keep reading the very next line, expenditures of approximately $1 billion in calendar year 2028. Look, my Catholic school math is not particularly the best, but to me that says $900 million versus $1 billion, so there's more money going out than coming in, which leaves employers thinking we're going to be right back here again, even with the increases in this bill. So with that, we do respectfully request an unfavorable report.
Thank you. Hannah, you want to go next?
Sure. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Hannah Allen here today on behalf of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce in respectful opposition to the bill. I certainly echo my colleague, Mr. O'Halloran's comments regarding the attachment to inflation and the substantial increase that we're seeing in the taxable wage base that, again, employers solely are using to fund the UI Trust Fund. I'll say employers certainly understand the need to have a solvent trust fund long term, and I think we want to be a part of that conversation. But because employers are the sole providers funding the trust fund, I think it leaves room for a larger conversation to happen with all of the different stakeholders, right? I think it's addressing the unemployment insurance program. There's a lot of pieces into it. We appreciate the narrow approach the bill sponsor took this year, but I think there are many other components of the UI system that employers will want to talk about and address here. So, with that, I'll end with we're not viewing this change in a vacuum. There are many revenue proposals that are on the table this session and potentially in future years to help fill the budget deficit. Many of them impacting businesses and the cost of doing business in the state. So ultimately, we want to make sure that this is an increase that's manageable for employers, that's realistic, and that also, we're having people get back into the workforce as quickly as possible, and we're not incentivizing them to stay on UI for longer than need be. So with that, I'll conclude there. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kaylee?
Madam Chair, honorable members of the Senate Finance Committee, for the record, Kaylee Locklear here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Alliance. Yes, we are in opposition to Senator Kramer's bill. The UI ecosystem, if you will, is fragile. And on a yearly basis, the Department of Labor comes to you and talks about the solvency of the fund. Now, last year, Senator Klausmeier in this body passed a study to look at an active search for work requirement piece of legislation, looking at active search for work requirements across the country to eliminate fraud and abuse that does exist in the system. And by no means are we saying that this is rampant. But we do know it occurs. And unfortunately, there is zero verification going on with these submissions. That study was just sent to me last night at 8 p.m., and it's highly relevant to this bill as verification impacts solvency, the tables that employers are taxed in, and thus the taxes they pay. And again, this bill would mean drastic increases, up to 50% of the state's average weekly wage. This means, and you heard it from my colleagues, I'm trying not to be repetitive here because they kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but these are changes that would be occurring when we're already seeing a layering effect from many years of pieces of legislation that have passed, and certainly, as Hannah mentioned, a whole new round of taxes that are being discussed right now. And to Mike's point earlier, I'm not an economist, but there is a math problem in that fiscal note that needs to be addressed as well. So finally, I'll end with, we want to urge this committee to convene the state's Unemployment Insurance Legislative Oversight Committee that has not met since before COVID. That's where we historically have had conversations about these pieces of legislation before they come to you. So with that, we urge a favorable or unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee. Mike, I want to know what's wrong with your Catholic school math. Mine's just fine.
It's good counsel is where I went, and Lord knows it was not the shrine or whatever it is now. That's darn near a college campus, but no, when I was there, it was in lovely Wheaton in Montgomery County.
Maybe it was the students.
Yeah, that's probably, you know what? I think you're probably more accurate with that, Madam Chair.
Senator Kramer, you have questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mike, I got a bunch of buddies who graduated from that old Wheaton Good Counsel. So
absolutely. Fly high with the Falcons.
There you go. So couple of quick questions. And again, the thought process being, are we in a position to perhaps find a compromise, or is this just we sit down at the table, talk about, well, there are things that we need to do to be at the table and have the conversation? And the reason I mentioned that is that I believe the bill has been introduced for 2 or 3 years now. Kaylee, you made reference to the fact that we have had Department of Labor here raising the concerns as we grow closer and closer to the precipice. I'm just wondering, out of the gate, for instance, Hannah, has the Maryland Chamber of Commerce put forward their solution to the problem to reflect what they believe would be an equitable response to the problem, and a solution that if there's concerns that this particular bill may be a bridge too far?
Yeah, it's a great question, Senator. I'll say so far we've very much been reactionary to the proposals that we've seen introduced. We have talked about this issue with members for a number of years, and I will say many of our members, many businesses, are not coming to the table saying, hey, it's been since the 90s since we've raised these numbers. We shouldn't do that. We should just oppose that. That's not at our position at all. I think we are in a position where we want to work with you and Delegate Charkoudian and the legislature on a solution. I don't know what that policy solution is, what the numbers are. I would certainly rely on the Department of Labor as well to help kind of guide that conversation and provide the modeling. But our members' number one concern is, if we're increasing, for example, in this bill, it's about a 76% increase in the taxable wage base that will continue to move up with inflation. Is that sustainable? And they're telling us that that is too much of a jump. So I think we're trying to figure out what that sweet spot would be, where we're helping long-term solvency, but it's also manageable for employers.
And I think when we're having that conversation, once again, there needs to be a reality check that we're talking about decades-old figures that were not adjusted to reflect the realities of inflation and the economy in the year 2025. So suddenly we're finding ourselves in a position where we do need to play catch up. And I guess, as I stated, the members of our business community, and I am absolutely sympathetic to their concerns, but the realities are the price of their products, whether it be service or merchandise, reflects the 2025 economy, not the economy of 1988 or that of 1992. They are charging for their services and their products the 2025 economy. So now we have to be realistic about resetting and adjusting to the 2025 economy for unemployment insurance. So I take to heart Kaylee's concern about pulling together the Legislative Oversight Committee. I have spoken with Delegate Charkoudian in the House, who chairs the committee on that side. We are hoping that maybe within the next week, we can pull together a date that works for everyone. And my goal would be, Madam Chair, that everyone who joins us at that meeting come prepared with realistic, legitimate proposals and expectations, so that if there is an opportunity to find something where there is general buy-in, then let's try to make that happen. Or is it going to be, well, the folks who support it, the folks who are opposed to it are just going to go out kicking and screaming, and we'll just see where the chips fall. So I hope that those of you who are at the table and the groups that you represent will keep that in mind. Let's see if we can have a meeting of the minds, but we do need to address this issue. We do need to keep the fund solvent and simultaneously bring the benefits into the real world of 2025. The testimony we heard, I think, that was very effective was the gentleman with the IBEW who was talking about 10 years ago. Through no fault of his own, he found himself on unemployment insurance with the maximum benefit of the $430. And here we are a decade later, having experienced incredible inflation over the past several years. And that same family today is getting that same $430. Isn't that so?
If I may, I have a little bit of a follow-up here, and I think we're in a similar position with the chamber. We understand that there's a solvency issue. Again, we haven't met and talked about this now for 4 years, and we know that there is a need for this temporary benefit, but a lot of this does tie together. And I had said to Delegate Charkoudian that it's really hard to start having these conversations until we eliminate the fraud and abuse that is going on within the system. We talked about the issue of ghosting before you guys last year. We have a very, very low unemployment rate in the state, and employers are struggling to find employees. We also know from the Upjohn study from a couple years ago that when you increase the length of the benefit or you increase the amount of the benefit, people will stay on it longer. So these are some things that we want to talk about with you as we look toward potential increases, because there are some other things I think that really need to be addressed and solved before we jump into these other increases.
And the results of that study on ghosting I received yesterday very late in the day and immediately forwarded those results to you.
Thank you
for your review.
Thank you.
And the reality is I don't want that to be sort of a red herring hanging out there that says, oh, okay, we're going to just keep pointing to, potential employees who ghost an employer. We don't know what may or may not be the cause of that. In many instances where they're simply just rude and they took a job and then didn't show up for a hearing,
right.
Or an interview, excuse me. But, I think looking beyond that issue, we have the big problem.
It's not a red herring, Senator Kramer. And I'd also say we need to ask if the active search for work requirements are appropriate. There's only one that has to occur in person. The other two can be met from a list that was created during COVID, and you can create a resume online, and that fulfills the criteria. Part of that study, and like I said, I have not been able to look at it yet, is we wanted to know what's going on in other states, because some states have 7 active search for work requirements. And if this is really about this being a temporary benefit and getting people back to work, and our employers need employees, we want that conversation to occur as well.
And I think that is, we welcome that as part of the conversation. But again, I don't want that to be a distraction to the big problem at hand.
Understood.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I don't see any additional questions. This ends the hearing on Senate Bill 752. Thank you to the witnesses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Senator Reedy, we have Senate Bill 785, Labor and Employment, Unpaid Parental Leave, Definition of Employer. And you also have Michael Halloran and Christine Walters.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll ask them to come up. Well, you've asked them to come up.
I've just asked them to come up.
Yes, you did. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Finance Committee. I think this is the first bill I've had before you, and it won't be the last. But it's a kind of a basic sort of technical bill that to fix what seems to be a bit of an oversight in the law. And it was brought to me by a constituent of mine, Christine Walters, who's very active with the State Human Resources Association, with SHWARMA, one of my favorite acronyms, SHWARMA. Shawarma. SHRM. Well, I like shawarma because I like shawarma to eat too. So it's a great thing. Anyway, sorry, thank you. So we've worked together on some issues before as well. So Senate Bill 785, just so we're clear, this is about the unpaid parental leave program that we passed in 2014. This is not about sick and safe leave or any of those issues. That's a separate bucket. And so Senate Bill 785 is a technical correction to the parental leave law that was passed in 2014. And just reading from the fiscal note, for the record, in Maryland, we passed this in 2014. In Maryland, employers with 15 to 49 employees in the state for each working day during each of 20 or more calendar work weeks in the current or preceding calendar year are required to provide employees with unpaid parental leave benefits. An eligible employee may take unpaid parental leave up to a total of 6 weeks in a 12-month period for birth, adoption, or foster placement of a child. This was actually, I believe, a bipartisan bill. A lot of folks, I think I voted for this. This was something that was like, we agreed this was important. And so it's something that we did. But it took a long time for regs to be promulgated. And then I think to the point where the pandemic had basically almost hit before regs completely came out. I may not be getting the timeline exactly right. But it's kind of been noticed now that there's some irregularity. So right now, currently, an employer can be covered under both the law for employing at least 50 employees at the same as the law that's for 15 to 49 employees. And we think this was an unintended consequence of the law. For example, an employer crossed the 50-employee threshold in January 2024. The employer will become an FMLA-covered employer in June 2024 after employing at least 50 employees for 20 or more weeks. But the employer will still be covered under Maryland's parental leave law through December 31st, 2024, because it employed 15 to 49 employees for at least 20 weeks in the preceding calendar year. Now, I had to read that many different times to actually understand that, but it's an overlap. And it seems that this was an unintended consequence of the law, not the intent to have a small employer subject to both laws concurrently. And I have in my written testimony kind of how this stacks and how it can cause a problem, but I don't want to bore you with just reading from my testimony. And I do have somebody, as I said, who's a real expert on human resource law and has been helping a lot of small businesses and their organization with trying to figure this out. So I'd happy to take questions when we're done, but this is a non-ideological and technical fix to try to address something that I think is causing some issues in our small business community. So I'd like to turn it over to Christine, and then I'll be happy to, of course, take questions at the end. Thank you. Turn that mic towards you a little bit there.
Thank
There
you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Senator Reedy, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and committee members. My name is Christine Walters, and I'm a human resources and employment law consultant. As described, right on the money, today, Maryland's parental leave law can cover small employers who are concurrently covered under the family medical leave. And I do believe that was inadvertent and unintended because both laws use that same definition of employing either 50 or more or 15 to 49 employees for 20 or more weeks in this or the preceding calendar year. And my written testimony has a couple of examples. Senator Reedy just provided one. I'll maybe get to kind of the question of, so what? So what if an employer is covered under both at the same time? One, I believe that was unintended, and that leads to myriad questions. Do the leaves run concurrently? Are they stacked? That is one and then the other. If they're stacked, which gets priority? Which runs first? Which runs second? So there are a lot of questions left unanswered by this. So our proposal is to remedy the overlap with just one clause that clarifies an employer covered under Maryland's parental leave law is, quote, not covered under the Federal Family Medical Leave Act for the current calendar year. And I'll just say, unlike one of the panelists on the first bill, today is not my birthday. However, I would also be very happy if you gave this bill a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Mike O'Halloran, here today representing NFIB, and I'm really here just for two reasons. One, to lend support and say a simple me too to Ms. Walters' testimony. And the second reason is to show the committee that, yes, in fact, I can be here in support of worthwhile legislation like this. Thank you. And with that, we certainly recommend a favorable committee report on Senate Bill 785. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I don't see any questions.
Move favorable.
Thank you, Senator. That ends the bill hearing for Senate Bill 785. And now, Senator, you're going to stay and do Senate Bill 658.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I believe I have my good friend, constituent Christine Walters, and Mike is on this one as well.
And then Stacy Maud.
Oh, yes. Come on up. Thank you so much. All right. Now, just a moment. All right. So Senate Bill 658 was brought to me by Christine as well as part of what we were discussing this interim. And look, we're looking for ways that we can be helpful to small businesses, even little technical things. Last year we passed legislation on non-competes, and I supported that, and I thought it was we reached a really good place on that with the issue of non-compete clauses. But the belief here is that there is a technical correction needed. The law is not clear that we passed last year, and frankly, we did some stuff in 2019 as well on this. The law is not clear that the restriction pertaining to non-competes applies only to agreements that cover post-employment. So the result is that Maryland employers may not be able to prohibit or restrict current employees from concurrently working for a competitor. And so this is corrective legislation that would clarify that the law forbidding these non-compete clauses, and I know we have some exceptions to that we put in relative to some of the health occupations, but it would say this applies only to post-employment restrictions. A non-compete or conflict of interest does not. It would happen upon separation from an employer. You would be released from it. I don't know if it's obvious or not, but just to give an example, if you're working for a company that involves, maybe it's a company that does home services, and you're going around meeting potential clients, then if you decide you're going to start working for another company that does the same thing, you could very well be competing by telling them, well, you know, I work for Jimmy Smith's electrical company, but I also work for Susie Smith's electrical company, and we could probably give you a better deal, and I get a commission on that. Or I'm selling software. This came up during the pandemic at times. Because so many people were working remotely, they figured out they could schedule Zoom calls for work for one job and then schedule Zoom calls to work for another job and double dip. But I don't think it was widespread, but it was enough to actually warrant some articles in places like the Wall Street Journal. And so really, the goal of our legislation we passed last year was to deal with the issue of non-competes that were unfair or that were restricting access for patients in the health industry and in veterinary medicine. This is just saying, obviously, you can't. A company that is particularly in some sort of competitive sales environment should certainly be able to restrict your ability to work for another company while you're in their employ. So that's what we're trying to clarify in the law. And again, we're happy to answer questions afterwards. I'd like to turn it over to my next panelist, if you want to go ahead and go. Or Christine, why don't you go ahead and then we'll go down the line. Okay.
Sure. Well, thank you again. My name is still Christine Walters, and I'm still a human resources and employment law consultant. And I think clarify is a key word. Maryland's non-compete laws have always been intended to address restrictive covenants that take effect following the separation from employment. This is evidenced in case law, prior bills, fiscal notes. I've provided information and quotes and clarification in my written testimony. Of all 50 states, I find only California restricts non-competes as applied to current employees, and I will add the District of Columbia does as well. Even the Federal Trade Commission's rule that was set to take effect last September and would have effectively banned non-compete agreements nationwide, even the FTC's rule expressly limited that rule to non-competes that took effect, quote, after the conclusion of employment. And so to clarify, we're proposing to add just 5 words to Maryland's law. I believe these words do not change current law. They don't grant any new rights or responsibilities. They only clarify that an employer may restrict an employee's ability to compete with the employer while the employee is working for the employer. And you might ask, well, Ms. Walters, if that's the law today, why do we need this bill? If you remember in 2008, we had a case, Catapult Technology versus Wolf, and the Maryland court ruled that Maryland employers had to pay out accrued unused vacation when they left their employment. And there was a big hoorah because the law had never been interpreted that way, but the law was silent. And so the Maryland Department of Labor, DLLR at that time, changed their website to reflect that. We drafted corrective legislation. We brought it to this committee in 2008, explained respectfully, think your authority's been usurped. You granted emergency legislation. It was passed and enacted. And again, we're just trying to avoid costly litigation and provide clarification. I welcome a favorable report.
Doesn't matter. Go ahead, Stacey.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the esteemed Finance Senate Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in strong support of SB 658. My name is Stacey Maud, and I'm the General Manager of ACE Handyman Services, Annapolis, Eastern Shore, and Ocean City. We are part of the ACE Home Services Division of ACE Hardware, and our goal is simply to provide reliable, high-quality service, handyman services that our customers can trust. We need to protect the significant investment we make in our people and operations, and one of the ways that we do this is through non-compete agreements with our craftsmen. They are a safeguard for our business model, the reputation we've built over the years, and the quality service we promise to every customer. We cover all of the overheads from licenses to general liability insurance, warranties. We provide tools, equipment, and vehicles. And yes, we spend a considerable sum on marketing to establish and maintain our customer base. One example of what happens when these agreements are violated occurred when a customer hired us to remove a through-the-wall air conditioning unit. After the job was done, the customer hired our employee on the side to install a window. The window was incorrectly measured and the job was botched, leaving the customer angry, hurt, and without any recourse. This is a reminder that it's not just a lost job and a damaged reputation, but that we're all vulnerable without the protections of SB 658. We're not trying to stop our craftsmen from pursuing side work. They can do this. But when it conflicts with our business, When they steal our customers or use our brand, it undermines everything that we've worked for. That's why we need the protections of SB 658. Just as intellectual property protections exist, in other industries, businesses like ours deserve the same safeguards. Thank you very much for your consideration. I ask you to support SB 658.
Thank you. And Mike?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Senate Finance Committee. Again, my name is Mike O'Halloran, here today representing NFIB. A simple me too, as the previous witnesses pointed out, it is really just about clarity. I think it's been the intent of the General Assembly. I don't think that's going out too far on a limb, that this provision, the non-compete, was intended for at the separation of employment. As Ms. Walters pointed out, it is just a simple 5 words, and I can be as skeptical as anybody else. The simpler the bill, sometimes more complex, but I think in this instance, it is pretty straightforward. So we do request a favorable committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for this panel? I do not see any questions. Thank you, Senator. We have 2 unfavorables, Steve Wise and Robin Elliott.
They'll do it at the end. I think we have a virtual at the end, right? Is that? Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Steve Wise here today on behalf of MedChi, the State Medical Society. It was my wish when this session began that I would not be in front of the Finance Committee talking about non-competes after all we went through last year, but my wish was not fulfilled. So here we are. This, as everybody knows, last year was a sort of negotiated settlement between the hospitals, health occupations, and veterinarians. And the last thing we want to do is sort of upset that. I think everybody left that situation in a pretty good place. But unfortunately, I think the bill as it's currently written does that. To sort of reset the landscape here, the law that we're talking about applies to 3 groups of people. Those who make 150% or less of the minimum wage, health occupations, and veterinarians. So some of the examples I've heard about the problem this bill could solve, I don't think fall within those categories. But take for a second the person around the 150%. I don't necessarily have an issue. MedChi doesn't have an issue if you want to make this clarification to that group of people. But we do have emergency room doctors, anesthesiologists who work at multiple locations, and that's known to all involved. I don't want to go through, and I don't think you want to go through, what it would mean if this bill passed and whether it would upset any of those relationships. We're fine with things the way they are. If you want to address Senator Reedy's problem, I think you can do that maybe in a more targeted fashion, leaving us alone, but addressing that problem. So thank you for the time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Robin?
Good afternoon, Robin Elliott here today on behalf of the Maryland Academy of Physician Assistants. I know you sat through the hearings last year, but a very quick recap in case you weren't there, and that is one of the reasons non-competes are problematic in the healthcare space is our healthcare workforce shortage. Physician assistants and physicians, as you've heard, work at multiple locations, very, very common. And so if non-competes are allowed to apply to secondary employment in the healthcare profession, it could be disruptive. Doesn't sound like that was the intent, but just wanted to lift that interpretation up from our perspective. Thank you so much.
Senator Reedy, you have a question?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious, and I know we've had some dialogue, and it's fine. I understand the concern, and I definitely agree we don't want to upset the balance we came to last year. As I look at the, and either one of you could answer this, as I look at the bill, all we're doing is adding those 5 words on page 2, starting on line 15 to 16. Then the subsection below is what we did last year.
So why is it not that the subsection below just is an exception to what we're putting in the 5 words above?
I see what you're saying, Senator Reedy, but if you go back to the first page, those same groups are listed there. So, so there's certain things, to your point, that only apply to the health occupations veterinarians at the bottom of the bill, but everything prior to that applies to all 3 groups that I named.
Right. I guess this, to me, this language doesn't restrict you from having an agreement. Okay, you know, let's talk offline. Maybe we can try to work something. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So as the chair that worked on brokering that issue last year, I do not want to reopen that can of worms. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That ends the hearing on Senate Bill. Oh, I'm sorry, the virtual. My apologies. Too many things going on. Mr. McCauley. Mr. McCauley, unmute.
There we go. Sorry about that, man.
There, thank you.
Using Zoom. We're Teams users here. My name is Ed McCauley. In 1989, I founded BLT. We're headquartered on Broken Land Parkway in Columbia, Maryland. We design custom electronics for commercial, military, intelligence, aerospace, and space clients. That means custom chips, boards, and complete systems. Some of our examples of our work you might know is we designed the first receiver chips for Sirius satellite, the radios in your car. Ground penetrating radar systems for the Black Hawk helicopters. Constellation of 48 satellites in low Earth orbit doing radar work. Unlike most tech companies that do our type of work, our engineers work directly with our clients. We train them to do so via a customized year-long training program. Fridays, we have 1-hour sessions we call CRLP, short for Communications, Relationship, Leadership, and Process Training, where we reinforce these concepts. You may have heard the joke, you can tell who the extrovert engineers are. They're the ones that stare at your shoes. We train our engineers to have the people skills so that we can have the best possible relationships with our clients. Fun fact, more than one of their spouses has thanked us. Our engineers are certainly in the upper income bracket as well. They earn 140 and some over 200K a year. We provide 100% health coverage and limit them to 40-hour weeks. We ensure a work-life balance. In short, we take very good care of our people and invest in them substantially. I'm here today in support of the bill that would secure our protection from an employee competing with us while they're in our employment. Our engineers came up with the core terms of our non-compete agreements. They don't want work taken off BLT's plate any more than the company does. By taking such good care of our people and providing them so much training, not tasking them morning, noon, and night, we feel it is wrong to allow them to compete with us. So I'm asking you to prevent our employees from hurting the company that's enabled them.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCauley. Any questions for this witness? I don't see any questions. Thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you, ma'am.
That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 658. We're going to go a little bit out of order. Senate Bill 400 with Senator Guile. Residential child care programs, transportation companies regulation, preventing abduction and youth transport act of 2025. Senator Guile, let's bring up your panel. Ann Getke, Leslie Margolis. Just that, those two.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Dawn Guile, District 33. Senate Bill 400 would prohibit youth transportation companies from using physical or mechanical restraints on children during transport, except in cases where there is an immediate risk of serious physical harm to the child or others. It also bans the use of restraints as punishment or for staff convenience and requires proper training for any personnel authorized to apply restraints. Additionally, the bill prohibits transportation companies from picking up children between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. To enforce these protections, the legislation grants both individuals and the Attorney General the right to pursue civil actions against violators with penalties including injunctive relief restitution and statutory damages. By way of background, the troubled teen industry is a multi-billion-dollar network of unregulated residential facilities that claim to rehabilitate struggling youth, but instead expose them to neglect, abuse, and psychological trauma. Across the country, thousands of teenagers have been sent to these programs under the guise of therapeutic intervention, only to endure mistreatment ranging from physical restraints to emotional and even sexual abuse. While Maryland does not house many of these facilities, this does not mean that our children are safe from their reach. Teen transport companies operate heavily within the state's borders, forcibly removing children from their homes and transporting them across state lines, sometimes thousands of miles away, to facilities where they have no legal protections or oversight. These transport companies thrive in the shadows, using forced deception and intimidation to strip teens of their autonomy before they even reach their destination. Our office has heard from Maryland survivors who recalled that their nighttime abduction was the most traumatic part of their experience with the troubled teen industry. Their stories are shockingly similar. Woken in the middle of the night by strangers, restrained with handcuffs or zip ties, blindfolded or hooded, and dragged into the back of a car with no idea where they were going or why this was happening. Many described the terror believing they were being kidnapped or harmed, only to realize their own parents had unknowingly allowed this to happen. Parents of these victims are often unaware of how these companies operate, having been misled into relinquishing temporary guardianship under the guise of helping their child. This bill is a critical step to stopping these abusive transport company or practices, but also to deterring residential facilities from targeting Maryland families. By regulating these transportation companies, we can shed light on the dark side of the troubled teen industry and provide struggling parents with the transparency they need to make informed decisions for their children. Finally, I want to personally thank Paris Hilton for her advocacy on this bill and her work with our office and my cross-file across the street. And she's worked on this bill and others like it in Congress and in states around the country. As members can see in the bill file, she has submitted written testimony describing her own horrific personal experience with these transport companies in question. Her bravery in telling her story is lifting up the voices of so many unheard survivors and is leading to real change. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 400. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm not sure, is this Ann?
Leslie Margolis.
Leslie, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Bidel, Vice Chair Hayes, and members of the committee. My name is Leslie Side Margolis. I'm a managing attorney at Disability Rights Maryland and manager education and mental health work. I also serve as our policy counsel, and I'm glad to be here today. We support Senate Bill 400 with amendments. Our amendments are outlined in our written testimony. I should say I'm here on behalf of Disability Rights Maryland and the Education Advocacy Coalition, a coalition of almost 50 organizations and individuals. Essentially, what we are proposing is to import the restraint seclusion requirements from education law, most recently addressed by the General Assembly in 2022. It's our position that mechanical restraint, chains, irons, straitjackets, hoods, zip ties, the other items listed in the bill, should never be used, not in residential programs, not in schools, not in transportation. So we are suggesting that mechanical restraint be completely prohibited and that physical restraint be used only if a student poses a substantial likelihood of imminent serious physical harm, which is the standard in the education law. This bill does not reach what happens when children end up in the residential programs, and I do want to put on the record that we are deeply concerned about Maryland's use of out-of-state residential programs. But Senate Bill 400 is a way to begin to address the troubled teen industry and the way kids get there from Maryland. So with amendments, we support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Do you want your two virtual witnesses?
Yeah, please,
and then we'll
Madam
ask
Chair.
questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you very much.
So Lauren Tenney, if you'll unmute and give us your testimony, please.
Hi, thank you so much for making time for me today. I just want to say that I am asking you to support this bill and to also do a further investigation into the state of affairs of what children are subjected to in Maryland. Restraint of any type is torture. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Convention Against Torture has said that it may constitute torture, ill treatment. I've said this in several testimonies on several different things, but I feel like if there was an Olmstead plan under the ADA in Maryland that was active, that a lot of these issues that was happening between institutions would be covered. Under the Center for Medicaid Medicare Services, there are already strict rules that are not even good enough, quite frankly, because they still allow forms of restraint. But there are rules around this that the simple fact that this bill is necessary shows that the basic rules that CMS has set out for restraint are not being followed in these ways. And so I think that when you look at the ways in which people are profiting off of the kidnap and torture of people in this state, that we need to really be concerned about it. All the way back to, the kidnapping is not a new idea in psychiatry and has been discussed for a very, very long time. So who is profiting from this? Who is protecting young people from being put in situations of where they are being tortured, to being taken to places that should absolutely not exist and should be shut down to begin with? So the entire system needs a drastic reconstruction to protect the rights and human rights, civil and constitutional rights of young people who by law don't even have the right to be involved in their own treatment. So the idea that there's anything consensual going on here is also a false idea. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you for your testimony, Lauren. And Caroline Cole, will you unmute and give us your testimony, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Beidel, Vice Chair Hayes, and committees, members of the committee, excuse me. My name is Caroline Cole, and I'm the Strategic Advocacy Lead for 1111 Media Impact. And I am also a survivor of the troubled teen industry and was transported to a facility when I was 14 years old. So today I am speaking on behalf of 1111 Media Impact in strong support of Senate Bill 400. I'm here to address the urgent need for reform in the youth transport industry, which has caused lifelong trauma to children in Maryland and also children across the nation. Each year, we have about 150,000 kids who wind up in youth residential facilities, with the majority of them being transported through this industry. And the practice of transporting them there, as you've heard, is deeply troubling. These transport companies frequently remove children from their beds in the middle of the night using handcuffs, zip ties, blindfolds, or sometimes they'll even put a bag over their head. And this has really caused devastating effects to thousands of young people. Paris Hilton, our organization's founder, was forcibly taken from her home under similar circumstances. She was awakened in the middle of the night, restrained, and transported by two men who she had never seen before. All of this has caused lifelong trauma for her individually. These youth transport companies, and I just want to emphasize this, they operate with zero regulation right now in the state of Maryland and little oversight. And many of the parents who entrust their children with them have very little idea of what methods they use or the harm that it will cause. But because of the lack of regulation with this industry, these actions are happening legally to the detriment of the children involved. So I asked this committee to issue a favorable report for SB 400. This bill will provide oversight and accountability needed to prevent future tragedies.
Thank you, Caroline. And I think Ann made it over. Yes. Ann, you want to give us your testimony?
Madam Chair, members of the Finance Committee, my name is Ann Godek. I'm the Executive Director of the National Affairs Office of the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, which investigates and works to eliminate patient abuse in the mental health system. I also speak on behalf of our international headquarters in Los Angeles. We very much support this bill, but ask that it be expanded to include chemical restraint. In new guidance issued last month, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid defined chemical restraint as any drug that is used for discipline or staff convenience and not required to treat medical symptoms. Illinois, in recently prohibiting manual, mechanical, and chemical restraint of youth during transport, defined chemical restraint as the use of medication that restricts a youth's freedom during a behavioral crisis or emergency, and is not part of the youth's standard treatment. We believe it is vital that chemical restraint with definitions such as these be added to SB 400 to expand the protections for youth that are intended by this bill. Protections against the traumatization of youth by companies that an article from the American Bar Association referred to as glorified human traffickers. Companies prey on distraught parents, charging them fees ranging up to $8,000 for transporting their children. Amending SB 400 to include chemical restraint will help to protect Maryland's children and youth from the harm of restraint and uphold their right to dignity and safety. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Do I have any questions for this panel? Senator Ellis, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. And thank you, Senator Gobb, for this interesting bill. I had no idea there was such a thing as a troubled teen industry. So, yeah, I've just a couple questions. So, this bill focuses on the transport of these young people. So, who calls these transport companies, and is it like parents or institutions?
Oftentimes the parents or the guardians. Mm-hmm.
The parents or guardian. And where do they take them to?
To residential treatment centers.
Okay, and so for what type of, is it like drug addiction, is it just mental or alcohol?
Could be a range of issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could be if they're struggling with behavioral type issues or others, issues that they looking for a solution, and they contact these residential treatment centers in order to transport their child out.
Yeah. So it's mainly parents and guardians who are doing this.
Right, but maybe unaware of what kind of practices.
I'm sorry, say that again?
But oftentimes unaware of what kind of practices are utilized in order to transport their children.
Okay. So they're not being, so if the parents are home, they call, of course, they would see that their children are being restrained or chemically restrained. So parents are actively doing this to their kids. Where?
Well, they may not be aware of what kind of practices are used by the transport company, or there may be instances where they may be knowledgeable of what kind of practices are being used, but it still doesn't mean, I think, that this is appropriate use or appropriate conduct.
Yeah, so this bill will tell the parents that they can't do this, or is it the transport companies? Who will be regulating with this bill?
The transport companies cannot engage in these types of activities, including the middle of the night, the 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., using certain types of restraints in order to transport them.
Yeah. So there are companies out there that advertise, we'll come pick up your kid and take them to these facilities.
Correct.
And do they require, this bill will require them to get a license in Maryland, or? And
I mean,
are they licensed now, or?
I'm not certain as to the question of licensure, but I would imagine they probably have to operate under some business license here in the state. But I'm not certain that question.
Okay.
This would just prohibit certain practices conducted by these transport companies here in Maryland.
Well, one last question, if you may. How would this bill pass be enforced?
The enforcement is with the Attorney General's office or individuals having an action, private right of action.
Okay, those individuals would be the kids who.
Correct.
They would be able to initiate this private action. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Reedy?
Thank you very much. This sounds horrific. Are these private residential, so these are people who are paying for private?
Yes.
This is not DJS doesn't come
Correct.
from these companies. Okay, I
Correct.
think you said that. Do we, and you don't have to answer this in comprehensive form now, but I'm just curious, sometimes we hear about, is everybody that does this doing these kind of practices, or is there like a legitimate group that's like You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just trying to be sure we're not.
I mean, you know, this is not to paint like a bad picture on all residential treatment facilities or all private residential treatment facilities. I'm sure that there are good actors. I mean, this is just saying that this is an all too often common practice that's frightening, that causes obviously emotional harm, physical harm to these children. That oftentimes the parents may be unaware of these practices occurring, and saying that that these transport companies cannot use these types of these practices when transporting children.
We're not saying you can't have transport companies. You're not saying you can't, but you're just saying you. Because I guess I'm confused. If a parent does this, they're not there when this happens. I don't understand. Like, it's just I just would love to know. Like, and we don't have to get into it all now. But how is this? Is this happen often? You know, what? How do we know we have any data or anything? It's concerning. Like masking somebody in a bag or something. Yeah. I mean, it's different if somebody's actually a criminal suspect. You wouldn't put a bag over their head, but I mean, you might handcuff somebody or something if you're DJS. But not these are not. This has nothing to do with law enforcement. Basically, you're saying this is all private.
Right. This has nothing to do with law enforcement. These are private companies. In fact, I think Ms. Cole could also speak to. I mean, I know in the instance of Paris Hilton and with her parents, you know, they engaged this company in order to take her to a facility, and I'm, to my understanding, unaware that this type of practice was going to be used. But Ms. Cole, I don't know if she wanted to speak to anything more on that.
Sure, I'm happy to elaborate a little bit on what that experience is like. And so if you are a parent, like Paris's parents, and you have a child who's displaying anything from, you know, early childhood trauma to depression, anxiety, or maybe other behavioral issues like substance use or things of that nature, you might start looking for options, as parents do. You get on Google and you start looking for help for your child. And oftentimes, because of different search engine optimization, I mean, right now, if you search help for my teen, I guarantee you the first thing that you're going to find is going to be residential care. And so after the parent goes through that process with the residential center, oftentimes that facility will then refer them to a transport service, and they'll say, this is what we use to get kids to our facility. And if you mention us, you'll get 15% off of their services or so forth. And so that's kind of,
I guess, and not to interrupt you, this is good information. I was on a different committee years ago. We used to say hard cases make bad law. Now, it sounds to me like this is a real problem, so I'm not trying to dismiss it. I was just sort of like, a parent wouldn't drive their kid to the facility? I just surprised. If you have enough money to do private residential care, it's just a surprise to me. I mean, I'm glad to know about it, because it certainly seems we want to put some, if nothing else, guardrails around some of these practices. But so the people will just they'll contract, and that's how they find it, and then they don't realize that their kid's going to have like this bad experience when it happens.
Exactly, because as the parent, you're being told this is what you have to do to help your kid, and this is going to be the safest way to get them to the facility.
I see.
So you believe the experts, they're telling you that that's what you should do.
Almost like it's an intervention style thing you're thinking as a parent, and then it's, okay, yeah. Interesting. Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you all.
Senator Mounts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two quick questions. Number one, are these rides covered by insurance? If they're going to inpatient facilities, I know sometimes there's insurance that covers them, or are they mostly out of pocket?
I mean, I don't know for certain, but I would have to gather that they're all out of pocket type.
Mostly
Okay.
out of pocket.
And then the second consideration is for these situations, I'm not aware of, I mean, we have limited resources in state. So as you're considering this, you may want to consider the reality that if you're in state and you have rules in Maryland but not in other states, and the child is being transported to a facility in another state, you know, how would you, if you're going to implement this, how would you have that carry through? You know what I mean? Maybe there's something to consider. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
You mean as far as regulating out-of-state residential? This is more on the transport companies that are operating here in Maryland.
Correct. So once they leave Maryland, I mean, if you can ban all this, and once you cross the state line, so, you know, it takes me 20 minutes to get to Delaware from where I live. And I have 4 counties in my district, from Ridgely clear down clear down to past Sharptown in Wacomico County, that whole corner of Maryland, you know, if you're gonna, it doesn't take very much to get across the line. So, you know, you could very well pass this, right? And then whoever the transport is, well, once they cross the line, then all the rules go out the door, so to speak. Just something to consider.
No, that's true. I mean, and I think that some of these advocacy efforts is working on all states in order to pass, and there's been successful in other states at having passed these types of guardrails on the kind of practices that are conducted by these companies. Thank you.
Senator Gao, one of your witnesses has her hand up, but typically, well, I think she's put it down. Never mind.
I was going to say, I'd defer to you, Madam Chair. I don't know what
I was trying to do this the proper way, but if you have a question for Ms. Tenney, she can answer it.
Okay. Ms. Tenney, I believe that you had something also to add to the question that was asked by one of the senators.
Oh, I think just as a psychiatric survivor, I just have to say that the state of Maryland, it's illegal to use restraint in state facilities on children in Maryland. So for those of you who are horrified by this, maybe it's a good time to eliminate the practice of restraint, any type of restraint, physical, chemical, mechanical restraint in Maryland entirely. And that this is not just an issue of a private company doing it, but the state of Maryland does this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions for this panel. Senator Gao, we're going to end the hearing on Senate Bill 400. This ends that hearing, and your witnesses did come in for Senate Bill 922.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Right.
Thank you.
So Senate Bill 922 is business regulation travel services surety requirement, and Senator Gao has a witness signed up, Saida Wari, and her brother is here also. We're going to allow him to testify, and then Jason Perkins Cone. That's your panel.
Oh, there. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, fellow members of the committee. Senate Bill 922 would put in place consumer protections for travel agencies to prevent additional tragedies from happening to Maryland families. During the summer of 2024, several Maryland residents tragically died while making a religious pilgrimage to Mecca, including Alhaji Wuri and Haja Wuri, parents of Saida and Aliyu Wuri, thank you, who has joined me today. I want to thank you for your courage and for being here and for your advocacy after an immense tragedy. Reports after the trip indicate that travel organizers had a direct part in this misfortune, failing to provide promised documentation and necessary support to travelers who paid for their services. In an effort to enhance consumer protections in this industry, some states have established industry mechanisms such as seller of travel registrations, which provide consumers with an added level of assurance they are doing business with legitimate entities and can provide consumers with certain avenues for recourse by requiring certain levels of insurance and bonding by registered SOTs, or seller of travel. Maryland does not currently have any licensing or registration requirements for sellers of travel. This bill would rectify that by requiring each seller of travel to file annually with the Department of Labor a list of independent agents affiliated with the seller of travel and evidence of financial security as spelled out in the bill. And depending on the gross income of the seller of travel or independent agent, have a surety or cash performance bonds to be posted ranging from $10,000 to $50,000. And in lieu of the bond required under the bill, a seller of travel or an independent agent may obtain a certificate of deposit or an irrevocable letter of credit filed with the Department of Labor, proof of professional liability and errors and omissions or E&O insurance, or deposit with the Department of Labor collateral. Sellers of travel may be subject to a fine for violating. And for the fiscal notice introduced, the bill would incur some expense to the state. However, I'm supporting an amendment that would remove the Attorney General's enforcement role, which is expected to drastically reduce the bill's costs. And for these reasons, I request a favorable report on Senate Bill 922. The Worry family here.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Senate. My name is Aliyu Worry, and to the right of me is my sister, Saida Worry. We are both the children of Alhaji Aliyu Dawsi Worry and Haja Aissatou Tijan Worry. We're here today to speak with you guys. We're here with you guys today to encourage you all to pass this bill. I had a few weeks, even a month, to write up a statement as my sister did, and I thought the better thing for me to do was just come up here and speak from my heart, because I want you guys to feel everything that I went through, right? Because this bill will stop other individuals and other families from going through what I've went through since June the 15th, 2024. I can't put into words or quantify the amount of hurt that I went through when both of my parents died, not losing just one parent, but both of your parents at the same time. It was really rough, and there wasn't really anything that I can do to find solace. If this bill is passed, the solace that I would have had is holding someone accountable. Right now, my mom and my parents have passed away, and there's absolutely nobody that we can hold accountable legally. We can try to find these insurance companies and we can try to sue them civilly and things like that, but there's no law in place to stop them from having these predatory circumstances that my parents ended up in. So I myself encourage you to pass this bill so no other family has to go through what I went through, and that if anybody does any backhanded dealings, they will be held accountable and in the court of law, and they will have to pay for whatever it is that mistakes that they made, even if it's a mistake. Sometimes mistakes you have to pay. But if this bill is passed, I do think it will prevent egregious mistakes like what happened to my parents. Things are going to happen in life. Mistakes happen, but this wasn't a mistake. And I do believe if this bill is passed, that it will prevent it from happening again. Thank you for your time.
Can I have a little bit of what happened? What was it that happened that's generating this bill?
Yeah.
I think Said, I think the daughter of the couple is going to provide some of that information, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and the members of the Senate. As my brother mentioned, my name is Saida Worry. I am the younger sister of Aliyu, and I'm the daughter of Alhaji Aliyu Dawsi Worry and Haja Aissatou Worry. I am here to strongly urge you to support the proposed Senate Bill 922. My parents died on June 15, 2024. Their death was in part due to the fraudulent acts of a Maryland-based travel company. They paid them to curate a journey of a lifetime to the holy pilgrimage in Mecca. This bill is deeply personal to me because it stands not only to honor my parents, but another Maryland resident, Haja Fatmata Korama, who also lost her life after paying the travel agency. It stands to protect over hundreds of other Maryland citizens who were defrauded out of $11,000 per person who were expecting a lifetime experience. On their journey to what should have been a lifetime experience, they walked for hours when they were promised transportation. They went days without having meals, confined to a hotel room because of improper visas. They paid for proper visas. They prayed for daily meals. They were promised all of this and did not receive it. The travel agency overpromised and undelivered, leaving the community with grief and unmet expectations. As someone who experienced firsthand the impact of the lack of any measure to protect consumers from fraudulent Maryland travel agencies, I can attest the vital need for this bill. My parents weren't the first to have ever been scammed or misled by a Maryland-based travel company. This has been going on for years and swept under the rug. It's unfortunate that it took something of this magnitude of the death of several Maryland residents to place something in action to protect its citizens. Sadly, they lost their lives, but their deaths will now serve a greater purpose. My parents were pillars of this community. Their infectious spirits will live on. This bill will allow them to continue to help the very community where they raised such a beautiful family. It'll ensure that other families will benefit from their deaths. In closing, I urge you to support the Don't You Worry Act. This is for Alhaji Aliyu Dawsi Worry, for Haja Aisatu Worry, and for Haja Fatmata Koroma. Let it be a lasting tribute to their lives lost and a step forward to making travel for Maryland citizens even better. I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you for sharing your story. I'm very, very sorry. I guess the travel agent sold them insurance that then didn't provide them the care, the help that they needed. Is that
correct? So they paid $11,000 per person. It was about 100 people on this trip. And they were supposed to provide full transportation throughout the stay. They were supposed to provide them hotels. They were supposed to provide them visas. It was supposed to be an all-inclusive food package. And once they got to Saudi Arabia, none of that was provided. The hotels weren't up to par. The food started off with a few meals provided, but maybe a few days into the trip, they stopped having breakfast some days and then dinner some days, so they had to go out and fend for themselves. As I said, they didn't have proper visas, so they really couldn't leave the hotel where they were lodging. So they were confined to their hotel rooms. But they did come together as a group. They bought a rice cooker to make food for each other. They had people who were there with the proper visas helping them out, providing them food and things of the sort. Ultimately, they were able to participate in some of the events, and it was in extreme heat. They weren't provided a tent that normally everyone who goes on the journey is provided one, as long as you pay the entire fee. They weren't provided that, so there was nowhere for cover during the entire process.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to add is that after this happened to our parents, we traveled ourselves to Saudi Arabia, kind of to complete the journey that they did. What they went on was a journey of Hajj. We went to Umrah, which is something similar, and we were awarded every single luxury that we can have, and we were young. And I still had a horrible time. Not horrible, but it was rough for me. There were times where I would sit and say, wow, this is rough for me. And I have every luxury that I can buy right now that I have. So just imagine what my parents and the other individuals were going through that didn't have the smallest of necessities that they would need every day. So just wanted to make sure I said that.
Thank you for sharing your story. It's very sad, but thank you for sharing it. We have one more witness.
Yep. Good afternoon, Chair Beidel, Vice Chair Hayes, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jason Perkins-Cohen. I'm the Deputy Secretary here at Maryland Labor. Today, I'm testifying in support of Senate Bill 922. I want to thank Senator Giles for leading on this very important legislation. Look, I can't give you more powerful testimony than the testimony that you just heard from the family that's directly impacted. I can tell you that without this legislation, the department has no authority to oversee the travel industry at all, which is what the legislation is really intended to do. Again, as the senator indicated, it requires certain providers of travel services to register with the department, provide evidence of financial security to safeguard consumers, and thereby produce greater accountability. The department shares Senator Giles's sense of urgency to protect Marylanders from bad actors, looks forward to working with the committee to make any adjustments necessary to make this a reality. And with that, I respectfully request a favorable report on the Senate bill.
Commissioner, thank you. So there is no licensing requirement in Maryland now for travel agents?
There is not.
Does the bill have a fee in it for the license, the annual license?
Yes, as drafted, the bill would require a $300 fee. We do have some friendly amendments that would streamline the bill. The fee is, part of that is to make sure that the fee pays for the staff required to oversee the bill.
That was my next question. Thank you very much. Senator Reedy?
Thank you very much, and we are very sorry to hear your story and your family's story. Can I ask, they passed away because of basically being exposed to elements and not having the care that they needed on the trip? Was that essentially what happened for both of them?
Correct.
Did they pass away once they returned to the United States, or did?
No, they passed away in Saudi Arabia.
Oh my goodness! And others did on the trip as well.
Yes.
I was surprised to know that there's nothing for travel agents. I do wonder, the one question, there's some opposition in the file just from, industry folks who are concerned that, that just with some of the things you talked about. Why we're holding in this case and in other cases like this, is it the travel agent's fault or is it the company that did it? It seems like we're putting it all on the travel agent, or is the travel agent in this case part of the package that was created? Is that what happened in this case?
Yes, correct. When you go to the pilgrimage to Hajj, you hire a travel agency that does these tours.
Because it's very specific what you're doing on this trip. Much like if I'm a Christian, if I went to Jerusalem, there were certain things I would want to do.
Exactly.
Absolutely, and I don't understand how, even when you said it just now, that there's all these other occupational licenses in the state of Maryland, but for travel, I can go to Baltimore and start a company. I'll leave Travel LLC, and I can get everybody in this room to go on vacation. And if something happens to every one of you guys, I won't be held accountable.
This is not nearly as serious a situation, but there's a whole documentary on the Fire Fest from a few years ago where these people put together this this big thing, and then it turned out to be basically a scam. So you feel like that was basically a scam in this case?
Yes.
Yeah.
And to your point, when they hire the travel agency is supposed to provide the proper visa requirements in order for them to participate. So they paid them expecting to get the proper visas, and they never received the proper visas.
And so let me ask this: there's nothing under the law currently that would cover this kind of issue, like it could be fraud or something. Where is that?
I can't really speak beyond the Department of Labor, so I would be hesitant, but I can say, obviously, as I said before, we have no ability to currently regulate or license that industry.
I think some of the industry opposition will be, like, there are travel agents who help book cruises for people, and then there are travel agents who do this kind of thing, and how do we... Like, if I go on a cruise, a travel agent sets up a cruise for me, and the cruise screws up, not nearly as serious as we're talking about. But even if something really bad happened on a cruise, it's really on the cruise line, not the travel agent. But this is a little bit of a different setup because they're facilitating the whole trip. So,
yeah, I think, again, working with the sponsor and the committee, I think the idea is that smaller issues that, I didn't get, I got meals, but I was asking for the premium meals and not the secondary meals. That wouldn't likely get covered here. These are for the really serious issues, and there needs to...
Well, we definitely want to get it right. It sounds like it's a loophole, so I understand the technical questions, but we're very sorry to hear, and we certainly don't want this kind of thing to be something Marylanders experience without recourse.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. Thank you for your testimony. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 922.
Thank you.
Senator Benson is here. We're going to go to Senate Bill 559 with Senator Benson.
We were over in the House testifying. That's why we had to take some bills out of order.
Senator Benson, how are you?
Hi.
We're gonna hear your Senate Bill 559, Transportation Study on Speed Limits, Interstate 495.
Testimonial blueprint. They're going strong over there. Woo. Be thankful. Be glad that you're here. Really something. But it's information we already know. But I think the public is entitled to hear about the blueprint. So, I'm very... Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Pamela Bidle, Vice Chair Antonio Hayes, and esteemed members of the Finance Committee. I'm here today to express my strong support for a transportation study on speed limits Interstate 495, and connected highways. This bill aims to ensure the safety of drivers as they travel on Maryland highways. With over 260,000 people getting stuck in traffic on I-95 every day and merging congestion leading to accidents on major state highways, it is important to consider consistent highway speed levels to reduce traffic problems and accidents. In Maryland, there is an average of 110,000 car crashes per year, and this bill aims to help reduce that number. We must help the drivers within Maryland reduce the impacts of merging between the various state highways. During this legislation, the Maryland Department of Transportation will conduct a comprehensive study on the effects of speed limit changes on highways in the state that connect to I-95, 495. MDOT will consult with local officials and stakeholders who have expertise in traffic safety issues to gather insights on the prevalence of accidents, traffic congestion, and existing speed limits on these highways over the past 5 years. By analyzing this data, we can develop an effective solution to address the concerns of drivers traveling through Maryland. With this study being enacted, we would have the knowledge to tackle and address the speeding and traffic problems of the great state of Maryland. If enacted, this bill will provide the knowledge needed to create a plan that ensures the safety of all Maryland drivers. And in my conclusion, let me just tell you all why this bill is important. If you go down 495 and you head toward Richmond, Virginia, on 95, the speed limit is 65 miles an hour. If you come back to 495, the speed limit is 55 miles an hour. If you proceed down 495 and you go to 495 headed toward Baltimore, the speed limit increases to 65 miles an hour. If I go up 70, if I go up through Rockville on Route 270, the speed limit increases to from 55 to 65. And then on my way to my hometown, which is Hagerstown, the speed limit increases to 70 miles an hour. We are all very concerned that it is unfair not only to the drivers in the state of Maryland, but people who come through the state of Maryland, traveling from the south to the north and the east to the west. And therefore, I think that the study is important so that we can determine whether or not we want to have consistency in our speed limits, or do we just leave it alone? Is there something we need to do to improve it? But in all fairness to the drivers, we think this study is extremely, extremely important. Therefore, I strongly urge the committee for a favorable report on Senate Bill 559, and thank you for your time and your consideration.
Senator Benson, thank you for your testimony. I don't see any questions. I don't think anybody's opposing this idea, but thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Are you going to go back and finish the blueprint hearing? Did you say the blueprint hearing's still going on?
That's not an excitable thought.
Well, thank you, Senator Benson.
But I must tell you, I was very impressed with the number of people who came to the hearing. If you go over there to the joint hearing room, the place is packed with people. So the interest is very, very high. But what I don't think they didn't make clear to the people there that the blueprint is funded for 2 years. The problem for us is what happens on 3 years from now. So I'm not sure that that was emphasized, but the presenters were excellent, and they were able to do a great job in answering questions. But I must tell you all that
He's got somebody to testify.
that it's really something. I do know that our children need to be educated. You know, I'm an educator, and education for me is paramount. And in the great state of Maryland, I do, by the way, I do have a John Dane Bear sitting to my left here. If we don't educate I was his school principal. Did you all know that? He's successful today because of me.
Well, you did a good job, Senator Benson. Thank you.
I think we did.
That ends the hearing on.
Did I give you any spankings?
That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 559. Thank you. So,
if we don't educate our children, we don't have to worry about a future because there won't be one. And we have a wonderful reputation in being a state of education, and we've done a great job with our children. And I'm hoping that that we'll find a way to continue to finance.
Thank you, Senator Benson. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 559. And now we're going to go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator McCray is in the same hearing, and so if we can have Senator McCray's staff member, Jacques, did I say that right? Thank you. You're going to do two bills for us. Let's start with Senate Bill 445, you and Jennifer Crawley, right?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and esteemed members of the Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Jacques Thompson. I do work for Senator McCray, and he sends his best regards. He couldn't make it today. Okay. So this is for Senate Bill 445. I stand before you in strong support of Senate Bill 445, a bill that will improve how Maryland runs the Federal Commodity Supplemental Food Program. This bill will place the Family Investment Administration in charge of coordinating and managing the program, making the process more efficient and streamlined for those who rely on it. Currently, the Secretary of Aging oversees CSFP, but this bill would shift that responsibility to the FIA, which already manages several vital assistance programs. By doing this, we make sure that the program runs smoothly and that every resource and dollar is used to benefit those who need it most. This change means better coordination, faster access, and a more effective system to help Maryland families who face food insecurity. Senate Bill 445 makes sure that the resources we receive from the federal government under 7 CFR 247 are handled by the central agency that already manages many public assistance programs. This will create a more unified approach to helping those in need. I ask for your support of this bill as it will make our state's food assistance system more efficient and effective. With this change, we continue to strengthen our commitment to Maryland's most vulnerable families. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jennifer, are you going to testify?
Yeah, just very briefly, just to say thank you, Chair Beidel, thank you, Vice Chair Hayes, and members of the committee. I'm Jennifer Crawley. I'm the Deputy Secretary for the Department of Aging. We are in full support of SB 445 and appreciate a favorable review of this bill. Thank you very much.
My analyst just said this bill's already passed the House. The cross-file's already passed the House. Looks pretty good. Thank you.
Yes.
Do I have any questions for Senate Bill 445? No questions. Thank you. That ends the hearing. And now we're going to go on to Senator McCray's Senate Bill 703, Family Investment Program and Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program Benefits Child Support. I don't see a panel. It's just going to be you, and then you have some other people to testify. Or do you want to come up as your panel?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
We have a panel.
Michelle Madero, Lisa Kilgamero, Zachary Alberts, Margaret Neal, and Callie Schmutz.
We also have someone who's virtual as well.
And we have two virtuals. We'll do them after this panel. Thank you very much.
So. All right. I urge your support for Senate Bill 703, legislation that addresses an inequity in Maryland's Family Investment Program, FIP, and Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, by ensuring child support payments do not reduce the benefits that families are entitled to receive. Currently, child support is counted as income in both FIP and SNAP, which often results in reduced eligibility for assistance. This can create hardships for families already struggling to make ends meet and discourages parents from receiving the support they are entitled to. Senate Bill 703 seeks to correct this by ensuring that any child support received is passed directly through to the family without affecting their eligibility for benefits. The bill applies to both FIP and SNAP, ensuring that local departments of social services will no longer factor in child support when calculating SNAP benefits. This will help families retain access to vital resources that allow them to meet their needs. Additionally, the bill includes a provision for the Department of Human Services to provide a report by December 1st, 2028, evaluating the impact of this change, helping to ensure that the program's intended goals are being met and that it is working effectively to support Maryland families. Senate Bill 703 takes a necessary step to improve the well-being of Maryland families, particularly those in single-parent and low-income households. I respectfully request that the Finance Committee vote yes on this important bill to help ensure Maryland families receive the full support they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. And who's next?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lisa Klingemeyer. I'm the Deputy Director of Policy at Maryland Family Network, and we're here today in strong support of SB 703. This program deals with temporary cash assistance, which, as a reminder, is our cash benefit program for children and their caretakers. 2/3 of all recipients of temporary cash assistance are children. As a part of getting temporary cash assistance, custodial parents have to apply and be compliant with child support. This committee in 2017 were among our champions in the General Assembly when we passed legislation to allow for partial child support pass-through and disregard. I wanted to thank Senator Reedy and Senator Hershey, who are not here right now because they were co-sponsors of that legislation in 2017, and Senator Lamb was a co-sponsor when he was a delegate in the House of that legislation. And so what that bill allows, which is our current policy today in Maryland, is that if you are on TCA and you have one child and your non-custodial parent pays child support, the state passes through $100 of that to you and then disregards it when calculating your TCA benefit. If you have 2 or more children, we pass through $200 and then disregard it, which is great. And that's provided a lot of money to low-income families on TCA, but we could be doing more, and other states are doing more, and that's what this bill does. So this bill would allow us to pass through all of the child support that is collected to families and then disregard it in their benefit. And the reason that's important is because temporary cash assistance, when combined with SNAP, our food stamp program, meets 61.25% of Maryland's minimum living level. That means these families are living in deep poverty, and Maryland has the highest rate of deep poverty in the entire country. So this program is simply about, this bill is simply about getting more money to low-income children and their families, so that the families that are on temporary cash assistance can build economic security, so that when they transition off the program, they no longer have to rely on programs like TCA and like SNAP. We think this is a great policy, we fully support it, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lisa. Who would like to go next?
I can go. Callie Shumitz, Vice President for External Relations with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy, also here in strong support of SB 703, because we see it as a way to increase economic security for some of the lowest income families in the state. And it's an opportunity for Maryland to join other states in improving the state implementation of a very flawed federal program, the temporary assistance for needy families. My organization did an in-depth analysis a couple years ago of how the state is spending its TANF funds, and we are only spending about 1/3 of TANF funds on core programs, including cash assistance. One of the other things that we're concerned about is that the base amount for cash assistance in Maryland has not gone up since 2019, despite how much costs for families have increased in that time. So we see this as an important strategy to get more cash to families. So one of the recommendations of our report, and it was also a recommendation that was in a report that the Department of Human Services commissioned last year from the School of Social Work, was to recommend full pass-through of child support rather than using those funds to reimburse the government. One of the other things that we are seeing, as was mentioned in the analysis, the DLS analysis of the budget, but there's an increase in the lack of people having their TCA cases dismissed because of lack of compliance with child support. So we're now up to about 20% of case closures are due to lack of compliance. So we think the setting up so people can get the full child support amount might provide another incentive for them to engage with the child support requirement and then be able to get TCA as well as child support. And just briefly, we'll say we think there's much greater benefit to the state to have more cash in families' pockets than the little bit of savings that the state gets from reimbursing itself for those services. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Beidel, Vice Chair Hayes, and members of the Finance Committee. My name is Michelle Medeo. I'm Director of Economic Justice with the Homeless Persons Representation Project, and I've been there 11 years, and I've worked with a lot of families over the years who receive temporary cash assistance and would benefit significantly from SB 703. When I've asked families over the years how they would spend additional cash if they've received it, whether through TCA increase or child support, all the answers are consistent, that the money would go to their children. So it would be to pay for rent, to catch up on utility bills, purchase shoes and clothing for their kids, provide for quality after-school care programs. So the increase in cash that families would receive as a result of receiving full pass-through would go directly to children. It would also assist in reducing homelessness in Maryland. The TCA benefit level is extremely low. It has not been increased in, I think, about 6 years. And so the maximum benefit a family of a parent with 2 children can receive in a month with no other income is $727. So when you look at fair market rent for a 2-bedroom apartment, which is right now, I think, $1,900 a month, it's no surprise that if you receive TCA, you cannot afford fair market rent. And so in 2023, over 1,000 families that received TCA also experienced homelessness. So that's why one of the many reasons we support this bill is because the child support that's being paid would actually get to the kids who are intended to receive it. It also would assist with efforts when a family finds a job and is able to transition off TCA. Generally, those jobs are extremely low-paid sector work, infrequent hours, inconsistent schedules. And so the child support while you're on TCA would provide a financial cushion for when you transition off and reduce the likelihood of returning to TCA pretty quickly after exiting. Thank you, and we urge a favorable report.
Thank you. Zachary Alberts.
Sure. Good afternoon, Chair Beidel and committee members. My name is Zach Alberts, and I serve as the Director of Advocacy at the Center for Urban Families, a West Baltimore-based family strengthening and workforce development organization. Center for Urban Families has been a leader in child support issues for nearly 3 decades, and this legislation is our top priority this session. As you'll hear later, research clearly shows that passing 100% of child support payments directly to family lifts children out of poverty, improves co-parenting relationships, increases non-custodial parental involvement, and results in more consistent payments. When a custodial parent applies for TCA, they are required to pursue a child support order against their child's other parent, regardless as to whether their current financial agreement is an effective one. This situation worsens with a practice called income imputation. In Maryland, 23% of obligors, that is non-custodial parents who have a child support order, have had their incomes imputed. It's a practice where courts assign child support obligations based on full-time minimum wage jobs that the obligor never actually has. That number rises to 40% in Baltimore City. We run monthly fatherhood classes where we regularly witness fathers' grief and frustration. They want to support their children, but they face an impossible system that gives them hard decisions. Because their imputed income never actually existed in the first place, their child support debt immediately accrues. When they're finally able to secure employment or get a little bit of money one way or the other, most of their payments go to the state rather than helping their children. TCA and other government benefits, as you've heard, are not enough to meet a family's basic needs. The current system forces non-custodial parents to choose between paying the state or directly supporting their children. They risk license suspension and incarceration if they choose to do the latter. I ask you to put yourself in these parents' shoes. Cost recovery is wrong, it's bad policy, it's bad practice, and it doesn't align with Maryland's values. We urge a favorable report.
Thank you. And Margaret?
Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Margaret Neal, and I'm testifying today in support of SB 703 because the way the current system works is wrong. I am a resident of Senator McCrae's District 45. As a single mother and sole provider for my family, I lived this reality for years with my children, including a son with special needs. After leaving recovery and trying to establish my career, I got on TCA so I could provide for my family and benefit from their work program. I received about $750 monthly, but trying to survive on that was incredibly stressful. With 2 kids at home, one with special needs and nobody to watch the children, it was really hard. So many times I felt I wanted to give my son up because TCA and SNAP just weren't enough. I struggled with getting daycare for him because of his special needs. I was owed several hundreds of dollars a month in child support, but when I got my check, I was only getting $160 because child support was keeping the money to pay back TCA. That extra money could have helped me with so many things. I could have gotten nicer housing in a safer neighborhood. I could have paid for someone to watch my son while I looked for jobs. I could have enrolled my daughter in dance classes she loved, but I couldn't afford. I just feel like if you have a state-funded program that's supposed to help mothers and kids, why would you keep the money that a father should be providing for their children? What is the purpose of TCA if you're going to do that? You have these mothers who need support from the government. They're trying to make things work with that small amount of money. And when they finally feel hope that they're going to be able to make it because going to get the child support, they get one more disappointment. I ask for a favorable report on SB 703.
Margaret, thank you for your testimony. Shox, do you want to go to the 2 virtuals and we'll ask questions all at once? Okay, thank you. Amy Vora?
Good afternoon. My name is Ami Vora, and I'm the Advocacy Director for Family Law at Maryland Legal Aid. Many of the low-income families MLA serves have relied on TCA benefits to stay afloat during hard times. And TCA is often flippantly referred to as a handout. But most people I talk to are actually not aware that these benefits come at an enormous cost to recipients. Federal law requires custodial parents getting TCA to give up their right to seek child support from their child's other parent and to assign that right to the government. The government then initiates its own child support case against the non-custodial parent and keeps the money from that case. This policy, known as welfare cost recovery, is extremely harmful to low-income families, allowing the government to pocket money that otherwise could have gone directly to children living in poverty. In 2023 alone, Maryland took over $19.2 million away from poor families through these cost recovery cases. As my colleagues have pointed out, research has shown that these policies destabilize low-income families. They're bad for co-parenting relationships, bad for parent-child relationships as well. And the research is unanimous, and it's clear that these cost recovery policies should be eliminated. Numerous reports, including one from Maryland's own ABLE Foundation, which was authored by a federal child support commissioner under the Obama administration, have recommended eliminating cost recovery so that all money can pass through to Maryland's children. That's what SB 703 does. Like legislation enacted in Illinois, California, Colorado, this bill ensures that child support money paid by parents does not pad government coffers, but goes to the children. Yes, this will be an expensive policy to implement because it's asking the state to stop taking millions of dollars away each year from low-income families. But to do what's right, our state must be prepared to absorb that cost. The harms caused by these horrible, punitive, immoral welfare cost recovery policies have persisted too long, and it must stop. Our government should not penalize people for seeking help when they need it the most. And for those reasons, I urge a favorable report on SB 703.
Thank you. And Diana?
Yeah. Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to testify today in support of SB 703. I'm Diana Azevedo McCaffrey, Policy Analyst at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, a nonpartisan research and policy institute in DC. I lead our child support policy work, and our main focus is promoting policy changes throughout the country that direct more child support to families currently receiving TANF and that formerly received TANF. I lead a coalition of state child support advocates across the country. I provide technical assistance to advocates and other stakeholders. And with Vicki Turetsky, former commissioner of the Office of Child Support Services during the Obama administration, I've researched and co-authored several reports on this issue. A little over half of states and DC pass through some amount of current support payments and/or arrears payments. The gold standard is to pass through all child support, and as of last year, Illinois became the first state to do so. By passing SB 703, Maryland can join Illinois. There's a significant body of research that supports ensuring that all child support payments reach the children they're intended for. First, studies show that pass-through policies increase families' overall income. Studies show that child support is a valuable income source, particularly for families in poverty. Second, research shows that non-custodial parents pay more support when their payments are passed through to their children. Third, research shows that passing through child support payments to families can reduce the risk of CPS involvement. This is an opportune time for Maryland to take action. There's broad consensus among parents, researchers, legislators on both sides of the aisle that all child support should reach families instead of going to the government to reimburse cash assistance. And as state TANF caseloads have declined over the years, making that happen is now much more financially feasible for states. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Diana. Do I have any questions from the committee for this panel? I see no questions. Thank you for your testimony. I'm going to tell Senator McCray that you did a really good job. That ends the hearing on Senate Bill 703. And our last bill of the day is Senator Lamb, Senate Bill 576, Labor and Employment, Mandatory Meetings on Religious or Political Matters, Employee Attendance and Participation, called the Maryland Worker Freedom Act. Senator Lamb, do you have a panel?
We do. We have Donna Edwards, Kayla Mock, and Laura Jackson. If they're here.
I'm sorry, Donna Edwards, Kayla Mock, and
Laura Jackson.
Laura Jackson, that's your panel. Please come up. Thank you.
All right. Last bill of the day. Good afternoon, Chair Vital, members of the Senate Finance Committee. Here to present Senate Bill 576 on labor employment. And for the record, Clarence Lamb, Senator District 12. This bill prohibits employers from penalizing employees who refuse to take part in mandatory meetings related to political or religious matters. These mandatory meetings are often called captive audience meetings, so to speak, and are commonly used by employers to force employees to listen to anti-union presentations. These meetings are generally not related to an employee's work duties and serve the purpose of discouraging unionization. It in no way prevents employers from communicating information they are required to by law. The opposition written testimony cites First Amendment concerns. However, the bill does not prevent employers from holding meetings where they speak on these topics. Rather, it prevents them from penalizing employees who would prefer not to take part in these meetings. This bill does have a carve out for religious corporations, organizations, and associations, as well as educational institutions or societies that are exempt from Title VII. So that they can communicate religious messages as permitted by existing law. We believe this bill is an important step that the legislature can take to protect workers' rights to associate and unionize as they wish at a time when these rights are under obvious threat. In particular, the current federal administration is taking the unprecedented action of firing an National Labor Relations Board member, as well as the National Relations Board General Counsel, leaving the board without a quorum. While we are unable to take steps to mitigate such federal actions, urge this committee to consider this favorably and as a common sense measure to be able to protect workers here in the state of Maryland from unduly having to sit before these meetings that are compelled by their employer. So with that, happy to turn over to other members of the panel and to take any questions at the end.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. What a wonderful afternoon. I began it with you, and I'm ending it with you, so how great is that? We definitely support Senate Bill 576, and as our sponsor very eloquently put forward, this is not taking away anybody's First Amendment. It simply says that I, as an employee, may still have all of these meetings. I may still talk about politics, religion, even anti-union if I want to, but I, as the employee, do not have to sit through that meeting, and I can actually get up and leave, not being fearful that you're going to fire me or put me on the midnight shift or tell me to work every Saturday and Sunday for the rest of my life. So with that, please pass this bill. It's an important bill and an important step for Maryland in protecting workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Kayla?
Good afternoon. Thank you to the committee for being here today to listen to my testimony regarding my support for the Maryland Worker Freedom Act. And thank you to Senator Lamb. My name is Laura Jackson, and I've been employed at Mom's Organic Market for 3 years. It's a grocery store. It's in College Park, Maryland, and we successfully formed our union, which is represented by UFCW Local 400. During that time, we were forced into captive audience meetings led by the COO of the company in an attempt to coerce us into not holding an election for our union. They were failed attempts to rob us of our democratic freedom to form a bargaining unit. The meetings were out of touch and a time-wasting anti-union effort during which we could have been working. Mom's intent was abundantly clear in that they wanted to scare us from exercising our rights. I heard from many of my coworkers who were worried about what might happen to them if they supported the union. Our bargaining unit voted overwhelmingly in support of the union not once, but twice. And it is imperative that the workplace remain neutral when it comes to the federally protected rights that we have as workers. I urge you all to pass the Maryland Worker Freedom Act so that workers in Maryland are able to maintain political and religious autonomy in the workplace.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kayla Mock. I'm here on behalf of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, Local 400. We represent over 10,000 members here in Maryland in retail, grocery, healthcare, and cannabis. We're here in support of this bill. We appreciate the fact that Maryland legislators are taking measures to protect its most vulnerable citizens in these unprecedented times. And we believe this bill protects our most valuable asset, and that's workers exercising their rights. Again, this is not an infringement on First Amendment. That's been addressed. It just gives the workers the right to refuse to listen or be in these meetings. And a lot of people will ask, well, why can't they do that now? It's important to understand that all workers without a contract are at will, which means they can be fired at any time. They are often concerned about retaliation or termination if they speak up and say, I don't want to be a part of this. I've also been an organizer with our local for over 10 years. I've seen these meetings be weaponized. I've seen workforces be separated by race, gender, ethnicity, all to weaponize anti-union rhetoric on behalf of the employer. 2 days ago, I submitted written testimony on this topic, and that testimony is already out of date. The National Labor Relations Board, under the new administration, the previous administration banned captive audience meetings as mandatory. It's already been rescinded. Things are changing. They are changing quickly. And workers shouldn't have to sacrifice their rights and their beliefs just because they punch a time clock in order to feed their family and care for their family. So with all of those reasons, we support this bill and urge a favorable report.
Thank you. Do I have any questions for this panel? I see no questions. Thank you, Senator Lamb. There's two more favorables, Terry Kavanaugh and Elizabeth Bobo.
Oh, Elizabeth won't be here.
Okay,
Thank you.
Oops, sorry. Mr. Kavanaugh.
Good afternoon, Chair Beidel, Vice Chair Hayes, members of the committee. Terry Kavanaugh here on behalf of SEIU Local 500, which represents 23,000 workers across the area, including the public sector and private sector. I was going to make several comments and remarks, but they were all made by the panel before me, so I'll just say we too. Thank you.
Considering you are the last witness for the day, we love it. Thank you very much for your testimony. That ends the hearing, and it ends our committee hearing for today. Thank you. Thank you all. Tomorrow is a long voting list, so Tammy will be sending it out, and be prepared.